right. I'm calling this meeting of the Boston City Council's Ways and Means Committee to order. For the record, my name is Kenzie Bach. I'm the District 8 City Councillor and also the Chair of Ways and Means. This public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will be rebroadcast on Comcast Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and Verizon Channel 1964. We've been having a budget review process of about 27 hearings over roughly 6 weeks. Today is actually the last day of that initial department level review process. And we strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in the process by giving testimony for the record. There's a number of ways to do that. One that I want to highlight is tonight at 6 p.m. We're having a dedicated public testimony hearing on anything and everything about the budget. So if you have any comments on the budget that you'd like to share for the record and you haven't had the opportunity up to this point, please come at 6 p.m. The Zoom link is on the public notice, and we would love to have you come and testify there. We'll also be jumping there straight to public testimony, so it's not a situation where you have to wait for the hearing to conclude. However, you can also join us through the notice for this hearing or the one we're having this afternoon, where at the tail end of the hearing, I'll take public testimony. Or you can go to boston.gov/council-FY21Budget to submit written or video testimony and learn about the budget process. Or email us your testimony at ccc.wm@boston.gov. And we also, on the website, are taking 2-minute videos of testimony, which will append to one of these council videos. And you can also informally tweet us your questions using the hashtag #BossBudget, BOSBudget. So we hope we'll hear from you. And this has been a strange time to be doing a budget review process, and obviously strange to be doing it on Zoom, but it's one of the most important things that we do together as a city is to set our financial priorities, and we have to do it in COVID-19 times just like regular times. So we're grateful to everyone who's been joining us along the way. Today's hearing is on dockets 0588 to 0590, orders for the FY21 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for other post-employment benefits. Docket 0591 to 0592, orders for capital fund transfer appropriations. And docket 0593 to 0596, orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. Collectively, those dockets make up the mayor's proposed FY21 budget, which was submitted back in early April. We will also today be considering docket 0598, order authorizing an appropriation from the 21st Century Fund, also known as the Public Educational or Governmental Access and Cable Related Fund, pursuant to section 53F3/4 of chapter 44 of the general laws. So that's a special fund, which we'll chat with our DoIT folks about. So the focus areas for this hearing today will be the Department of Innovation and Technology, the Inspectional Services Department, and as I just mentioned, the PEG Access Fund. I should say this is abnormal in the sense that normally the Inspectional Services Department and DoIT would each get their own hearing, and we've combined them today. We'll be hearing from ISD first and then turning to DoIT. However, the fact that we've got the two departments here together does create an opportunity to talk about some of the efforts to streamline and digitize processes in the Inspectional Services Department on which the two departments have been collaborating. So we look forward to that conversation. I'm expecting today we're going to be hearing from Dion Irish, the Commissioner of ISD. We're also joined by Chief Patrick Brophy, Chief of Operations. We'll also be hearing from Kelly Mackey, Claudia Correa, Aisha Miller, and Christopher English, all at ISD. And then from DoIT, we've got David Elgis, the Chief Information Officer for the city, joined by Greg McCarthy, Gina Thief-Falvey, Alex Lawrence, Mike Lynch, and Eddie Pinkerton from his staff. So we're grateful to all the city staff for joining us today. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to either Chief Brophy or Commissioner Irish, whoever's going to lead off on behalf of ISD.
Chief Brophy.
So thank you very much. I will keep my remarks very brief. I do want to thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and all the members of this body for coming to talk to you about Inspectional Services. Inspectional Services has not stopped working since day one of the COVID, and they have been, right on the front lines, making sure that all of our businesses are complying with the guidelines set forth by the state in regards to the stay-at-home and the guidance from the mayor and the directive from the mayor. We are currently the first industry to reopen is the construction industry, and the team at Inspectional Services has been working very, very hard to get that back up and running in a safe manner. And it's being, our outline for return to work is being used across the Commonwealth and a number of municipalities about how they can start their work back up again. I said to Councillor Bach at the beginning of this call how impressed I was at her thought of combining DoIT and ISD together. I think it's a great thing because we have been we meaning the Inspectional Services Department and the Operations Cabinet has been the beneficiary of a close collaboration with DoIT over the last year and a half under Commissioner Irish's leadership. We have made technology long before COVID. The technology piece has been something that we thought was very, very important. We brought on a number of new staff to come in and help bring technology to the forefront. We've done a number of new purchases in terms of hardware and software to get us up and ready. If it weren't for that forward thinking and that collaboration with DoIT and David's team, we probably wouldn't have been as prepared as we were for a work from home. With that, it's been had a few little bumps at the beginning, but right now we are happy to say that everything can be done remotely and everything is being done remotely, and we are preparing for a return to work and reoccupying the space and welcoming the public back into our building at 1010 Mass Ave. We've been fielding a lot of complaints over the course of the 12 weeks, and Aisha Miller and the Constituent Services has been doing an amazing job. Kelly Mackey at Inspectional Services has been overseeing a lot of our IT and our automation. Chris English hasn't left 1010 Mass Ave in the past 12 weeks, and he has been there along with Sean Lyden, our Deputy Building Commissioner, and Commissioner Irish has been putting out fires left and right and keeping this place up and running. And it's been nothing short of amazing to see what he's been doing under very difficult circumstances. So with that, I will yield my time to Commissioner Irish. I do look forward to a robust conversation, and I thank everyone for their time and the opportunity to talk to you. One last thing I do want to make sure I mention and thank the council for. Last year, you were great supporters of automation and great supporters of digital plans, and we're in the process of implementing that, and Commissioner Irish will talk about that. So that's something that's been very important, and we've had some great support from most notably Councillor Baker from Dorchester, who has been very forward thinking in his efforts to automate and increase the technology and accountability of ISD, and I think we're getting there. And with the team that Dion has built at ISD and the collaboration with IT, we're very lucky and very blessed to keep going. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I will yield my time now to Commissioner Irish. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much, Chief Brophy. And Commissioner Irish, if you don't mind, just before you go, I just do want to note, I neglected to mention my colleagues who have joined us. So I'm joined here today by Councillor Liz Braden from District 9, Councillor Ed Flynn from District 2, Councillor Anissa Sapi-George at large, Councillor Lydia Edwards, District 1, Councillor Andrea Campbell, District 4, Councillor Kim Janey, District 7, Councillor Matt O'Malley, District 6, and Councillor Frank Baker, District 3. Thanks so much, Commissioner Irish. You're still muted. If you just unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thanks, Chief. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I also like to thank all the esteemed members of the City Council for your collective leadership and making the city what it is. We're certainly in a trying time. I can say in my 25 years of city service, I've never been prouder to be a part of city government, particularly under Mayor Walsh's leadership. During these challenging times, it's been nothing but steady and forward thinking, and with the public health concerns being at the forefront of this. So I want to thank my team publicly before we get into the testimony. The team of ISD, great during this time when, unfortunately, as of today, we're over 100,000 people who have passed away from COVID-19 in 4 months. I know in the city of Boston, we've had over 6,000 people who have recovered from this. And we've had about over 600 people who have unfortunately passed away. So my condolences to everyone who's lost someone or who's gone through some struggle, or lost a family or friend. So certainly a challenging time, but we're happy at ISD that at this time when we're needed, that we're able to serve and while still keeping our folks safe. And thanks to our partner department, DoIT, has been key in helping us to provide more services in a remote fashion and enable us to go through this time. But I know today we're going to talk about the budget. This is a little bit different format. We've gotten the questions from you, and I think it's great that you had that working session so we could understand the things that you wanted to hear most about from us. We formatted them in several buckets so that we could answer the questions coming from different councillors on the same topic. But I'll start to maybe reference the questions, not reading them fully, and then go into some answers and take questions. If that works.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah. So if you want to address those questions in your presentation, and then councillors, when we get to Q&A, we'll augment with anything else that they're wondering about or any further detail they'd like.
Does that work?
Yeah, that's great.
So we had a question. You wanted more information about the short-term rental program, and the question specifically was about was money added in the budget for STR and for COVID-19 inspections, and how much has been spent so far? There hasn't been any funds added for COVID-19 inspections for STR, and it has necessary. The funding that we have for inspection resources allows us to respond as needed to COVID-19 or any other thing that falls within our realm. For the short-term rental program, it was initially funded with clerical staff and also funded for 2 STR housing inspectors. Those inspectors, STR program is pretty much a technology-based enforcement program, not so much a field requirement. So for that, we shifted those resources, which were still helpful, but we shifted them to aid on the technology side, because most of the work that we're doing with STR is making sure that our properties are eligible. We're scrubbing the internet, we're scrubbing all the sites to find out listings and make sure that listings that are shown for Boston are in fact eligible. And from there, we do enforcement using technology as well when there are ineligible people who are participating in the short-term rental market. We also we have a contract with a company called Host Compliance. They help us with scrubbing all the short-term rental sites to cross-reference that with information on who's eligible to actually be on these sites in Boston. And we spent $58,000 on that contract. So the clerical staff that was hired for the program, there are 2 of them for $80,000 combined. And the inspector positions, which were changed to analysts, were in a range of $54,000 to $82,000 each. Should I go on to the next question?
Yeah, so I think that what makes most sense is for you to just run through the questions that feel easy for you to answer up top, and then people can jump in with any that you skipped or they didn't get clarity on.
So there's a question about whether or not we are cross-referencing the short-term rental database to ensure that to eliminate fraud, and the answer to that is yes, and that's why it's such an technology-based type of enforcement tool. We're looking at a lot of data. We know what properties are eligible, property types, owner occupancy, that type of thing, and so we're using that to see what's actually out on the web and being marketed for short-term rentals. And we actually have on our website the data set that one can go on to determine whether or not your property would be eligible, and also properties that are eligible are shown on that site as well. mentioned before, but enforcement, really does enforcement require work in the field? It does on occasion when we're having, when there's some challenges. We have folks who say that they're owner occupants when in fact they're not. So sometimes it requires some field work, some investigation, some interview to add to the technology. Overall, we've had 1,990 applications for short-term rentals. We approved 967. We've denied 1,045. We've issued 449 fines for failure to register or for registering ineligible units. Total fines have been over $90,000 in fines. I'm going to pivot now to the question about, just for an update on the rental registration program. For that particular program, we've registered 127,266 rental units. In the 5 years the program has been up and operating, it's inspected over 65,000 units. That number increases every year. This year we were looking to increase the number of rental inspections that we were able to do in a particular year, but that's not going to happen based on the pandemic. Revenue for our registration has been over $7 million, and for inspections, about $2.5 million. Next, we had a question about the ADUs, the additional dwelling units. I'm going to ask my Chief of Staff, Christopher English, to give an update on the ADU program.
Thanks, Commissioner. Good morning, everyone. So for the additional dwelling unit program, in FY20 to present, we've had 28 total applications. 17 have been issued permits. 5 applications ISD is awaiting additional information on. There's another 5 applications permits that are ready to issue, and only 1 application has been abandoned. So overall, throughout the entire program, we've had 61 total applications, with 9 of those fully complete, 28 in construction right now. The average cost per unit for these is just over $80,000, but working with DND, the Housing Innovation Lab offers a homeowner assistance program for design and construction with up to $30,000 loans. And over the life of that program, we've had 5 loans issued that have gone on to receive ISD permits for construction. Over the past year, we've been working with the fire department and DND and the BPDA on some training seminars and some application review meetings with potential applicants. We've advised just over 300 folks, primarily single family homeowners and 2-family homeowners, but also architects and contractors have participated as well over the course of this past fiscal year. During these sessions, applicants, present ideas to us and the other agencies and receive feedback on design and process. We also have this posted on our YouTube channel, so folks can watch some of these sessions. Moving forward, we are currently working with the fire department and the Housing Innovation Lab on expanding the ADU program into backyard spaces and into converted rear structures. So we're trying to roll that out. At this point, we don't really anticipate COVID-19 having an impact on the ADU program. I know that was one of the questions that came up during the working session, but we've seen a steady application process and interest in it. So at this point, we don't feel there's going to be much of an impact.
Yeah, I think the only impact on that would be maybe how we operate instead of having the in-person sessions to help advise folks that will be done in a remote fashion. So before I go to the next bucket that I've put questions in, this bucket basically bundles the questions that ask for updates on our programs and initiatives. Do you have any questions before we talk about the next bucket of things?
No, I think probably move to that next bucket, and then, because then we'll go through counselors' questions, and they might have questions in a few different categories. So I think we should just, why don't you keep going for now?
So now we'll talk about the quality of life bundle, I call it. So there was a question about what ISD, how we'll be operating with the phasing of construction. I think it's been pretty widely broadcasted that that to operate construction sites in the city of Boston, that we are requiring COVID-19 safety plans and affidavits for every single permit. Those plans, we put extensive effort into educating the contractors and the public as to what that planning entails. It entails, what steps are taken to keep our workers healthy at the start of the shift, what practices are going to be in place on site to make sure that we have physical distancing, what type of hygiene practices are going to be on site, will there be PPE provided as needed, what's the communication and training protocols, and what measures are going to be taken if someone becomes sick on site. So those are the basic elements, but we understand that we need to do much more than that to help contractors, particularly the small contractors. So we teamed with the Office of Economic Development. We've had several workshops for over 500 contractors for about 90-minute sessions where we went into detail on how to do that. We've created educational videos that are published on our site and through our social media channels that are helpful with that, as well as the workshops that we've had for those 500 contractors are also available on the web, as well as a checklist and best practices and just guidance on how to create those guides. We've had over 3,000 affidavits and plans submitted by ISD and to ISD and are being reviewed and before we allow sites to open up, and we're checking on sites in the field. So that is going pretty well, and I think that's probably a good model for other types of things that are opening up, that it will be extensive education required and guidance required for things that are being allowed to open up. And so ISD is also involved in a lot of other areas where we're providing guidance to make sure that as things are opening up, that we're communicating what is going to be necessary for them to open up safely. Because the last thing any of us want is to have a huge spike and set things back. So that's what we're doing when it comes to construction. And there's also a question that came up later about rodent control. As it relates to construction, every construction site has to have a pest control, a rodent control plan. So that's a part of how they operate as well. So we're just adding a new requirement with the COVID-19 safety. And there's a question about what would happen if we find sites that are not safe. Of course, we're going to educate folks and give them opportunities, but ultimately, if we find sites that are not safe, we're going to close them down. And until we're convinced that they're going to be able to operate in a safe way, that they have the hygienic practices, the PPE in place to keep workers safe. There were some rodent control questions, and I know there's been a lot on the CDC and in news stories that there is an uptick in rat sightings. We are seeing an uptick here. We've had about 33 more complaints compared to the same time frame last year. I think the reason why we're also getting more sightings is because people are seeing rats in places that you probably didn't see before because of the closed restaurants and things like that, and the lack of food sources. So, but my team, I'm lucky to say that in Boston, we have a team that also does pest control. Most cities and towns, they do enforcement and enforce the requirements to keep pests out of our community. But beyond that, we also do our own pest control. And so we're on a daily basis, starting at 4 a.m., we have teams of inspectors who are going around the city, and we're doing our own baiting in public spaces, parks, public ways, sewers. And so we're on top of it, and we're going to look to do more educational outreach to make sure that everyone in the community understands that we all have a shared role in how we take care of trash and things like that to reduce the incidence of rodents. There was a question about, can we expand rodent control to various neighborhoods? We provide rodent control throughout the city. We monitor it throughout the city on several levels. We have a dedicated team in our environmental services division, but some of our other divisions also play a part in voter control. Our health division, they're practicing voter control and requiring, I should say, around food establishments. And in our housing division, they're doing the same thing when it comes to residences. And as restaurants phase in and begin to open up, that's a priority. It's always a priority for us around food establishments, and it will continue to be to ensure that as establishments open up, that we continue to mitigate pest incidents and rodent incidents. There was a question about trash removal. It's ISD, we're not the agency that handles trash removal, but we do work closely with code enforcement, who's a part of the Department of Public Works, where we work closely and well together because we're trying to address the same issues often. And ISD also enforces the site cleanliness ordinance, which requires that establishments that don't have a city pickup, that we want to know what their plan is for trash removal, and they have to submit site plans to us, and we review their plans and take a look at the site before they're allowed to operate. And we have had an increase in the site cleanliness permits issued. There was a question about how we deploy our inspector resources and whether or not particular neighborhoods like East Boston in the North End required more than one building inspector. The answer is that we routinely evaluate demand for services around the city and look at how we should properly deploy inspectors, and we do change our staffing pattern based on that time to time. And I am happy to report that we are going to add an additional inspector to East Boston in particular, because there is a lot of construction activity there, but it's also very high volume of complaints that come in. So there's a lot of demand for inspection resources there, but we're up to staff now. We actually brought on some new inspectors, and one of our new inspectors will be in addition to our current inspector, Peter Kinney, who's in East Boston. And if any of you have not seen the COVID-19 safety inspection video yet, you should take a look at it. Peter Kinney is a natural. We should put it in for an award or something. But we're going to have an additional inspector there, and we were in the North End in Ward 3. We have 2 or 3 inspectors assigned, so we do change our staffing to make sure that it meets the need in the city. How is ISD positioning itself to respond to the new responsibilities that go along with COVID-19 types of complaints or inspections? So we've already been doing that. Honestly, we've had to shift quickly to discontinue some of the inspections that were a part of our regular routine and take on new things. When we had restaurants and food establishments, we had to assist them and give them guidance on how to shift to the takeout operations. We've helped restaurants shift to knowing how to properly sell groceries. We've been giving guidance to supermarkets and all type of establishments, that some establishments that we didn't regularly visit because they're not licensed or permitted by us, but they need guidance, because if they're open under the essential orders or the public health orders, then we want to make sure that they're following all the requirements that are required. So as we roll more things out, mask requirements, as we're phasing new operations, where we're going to be involved in helping with guidance, but also helping with enforcement, and likely bringing in additional parts of ISD as needed. And we're also working closely with the Public Health Commission. We communicate on one of the new things that are opening up and how we can coordinate our enforcement strategy. So we're very confident that we have the resources and to handle what's coming our way, and our communication and our collaboration is impeccable. So we're very comfortable with where we are. But a big focus for us, as I mentioned, with construction is going to be the fact that more guidance is needed, because people want to open up, but they want to continue to be safe. And when people aren't complying, they want to know that ISD is going to be there, or the city as a whole will be there to address these concerns. We're going to shift now to finance and staffing. And I'm going to ask Assistant Commissioner Kelly Mackey, in charge of Administration and Finance, to cover that topic.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning, everyone. So the first question was about ISD bringing in revenue from permitting. ISD brings in approximately $70 million a year for the past 2 fiscal years. So far in fiscal year 19, we have already hit that number with a few months remaining. Our budget is closer to 20 million, a little bit under that. So we do return a substantial amount of funding to the general fund. There's also a question about the anticipated impact of COVID-19 on our revenue. We did see a significant decrease in the month of April. With construction reopening now, it's a little bit too soon to say what the extended impact will be, but we'll be closely monitoring that as construction sites come back online. There was also a question about expenses related to COVID-19. So far, our expenses have been fairly low. For overtime, we've incurred under $10,000 of expenses. And then in terms of additional investments, again, under $10,000 in non-personnel costs, that has covered PP&E, sanitizing items, video conferencing equipment, and some training. And finally, there was a question about our increase in overtime, which was the major increase to ISD's budget this year. That is related to a change in our process for after-hours inspections. Currently today, we provide that service and bill out to the contractor directly after the service is delivered at an hourly rate. That is a large burden for our small HR staff to manage that overtime, as well as the invoicing and collection of that revenue. We worked with council late last year to move that to a flat fee, which will allow us to collect that fee prior to service, increase our collection rate, and just minimize that burden on our staff in terms of collection. What that does mean is, rather than being a collectible off of our budget, it will show both in our overtime budget, but we'll also see a parallel increase in revenue. And then with that, Commissioner, I can switch it back over to you unless you'd like me to touch on any of those questions in more depth.
I'm fine as long as the council is fine. And I know that came up as a question as to why our overtime was increased, but it really is not being increased. Just reflected differently. Yeah. Now we'll talk about the community engagement, particularly the Zoning Board of Appeal. Question for a progress report on the mayor's executive order that was signed on February 24th. You know, the mayor signed an order then to order us to modernize the functions of the Board of Appeal to make it more accessible and transparent to the public, to increase public confidence, to address the need to modernize the functionality and efficiency of the board. We intend on having electronic submissions, to streamline operations. We want to enable online applications and payments for permits and petitions, electronic submission of plans. We'll get more into detail on that when we talk about e-plans. Email notification of hearings, deferrals, new hearing dates, etc. The order included new strict standards for conflict of interest, financial disclosure, ethical disclosures, for trainings for staff members, for board members on appointment and renewal. Also, it bolsters our transparency by requiring disclosures of requirements prohibiting members from participating in projects that they have interest in, or prohibiting members from having subsequent business dealings with any project that they voted on. So it establishes very strong standards for training as well. It emphasizes that the importance of making sure that ZBA hearings are accessible to residents, and having assistance for folks who may not be familiar with the project or with the process, I would say, to understand their rights and how to navigate the Board of Appeal projects, and to also ensure that we're making accommodations for our language access. As we know, this order was signed on the 24th, with help from many members of the City Council. Shortly after that, on March 10th, I would say, the executive orders were issued to declare public health emergencies, which shifted our operations to the reality of dealing with the pandemic, and now we're in a phase where we're dealing with recovery. The first deadline that would have come up would be the April 8th deadline, which would be to have an ombudsperson and to provide their assistance with understanding your rights and language access at a board hearing. We have not had a full board hearing since the signing of this executive order. We had recently, on the 14th of May, we decided that it was appropriate to test the waters, so to speak, because at some point we do need to have hearings and in a remote fashion. So we had a subcommittee hearing on May 14th to test the waters, and also understanding that subcommittee votes lead to a recommendation that still need to go to a full hearing. So in fact, we haven't had a full hearing. We intend to have a full hearing. I'm looking to have something before the month of June ends, where we would only take up some of the matters that were recommended at the subcommittee hearing and other subcommittee type projects that small homeowner type projects, dormers, decks, things like that, that we need to address, but also not things that have already been vetted, already been through a community process. Because going forward, we understand that the community process needs to be, we need to figure out the details on that. We're working on that with neighborhood services. We're working on that with DoIT. We're working on that with the city council. We want to make sure, and also with the community, we want to make sure that once we do reestablish the process and we're hearing things that are controversial, that everyone's comfortable and has confidence in whatever process we'll use. So we're looking to make the first meeting that we had, full meeting that we have in June, probably near the end of the month, an opportunity to really implement these new things, to have an ambassador that's available to folks who want to testify beforehand so they can understand their rights. Also to know what language assistance is needed so we can provide that accommodation. We are also looking at new accommodations that we need to provide, the new things that we need to think about operating in a virtual environment. You know, we're testing. We want to make sure we find a platform that we feel confident in, that is secure, but also something that is user-friendly. And we understand that once we do select that, we need to educate as well so that everyone understands how to use it and in different ways, not requiring a computer, making sure that folks can participate by telephone, but also making sure that we accommodate residents who can only attend in an in-person fashion. I think we can definitely make an accommodation to provide an in-person opportunity to participate, even if it's a virtual hearing. So we're looking to, we have some, what we think are good ideas that we want to get out soon and have a meeting and hopefully build the confidence that's going to be necessary so we can take on more challenging things and move things forward in that fashion. But the other deadline I want to note for the executive order is that it required that we have a business meeting by June 22nd. And the purpose of that is that we also want the board to have written policies and procedures so that we're consistent and that it's publicly known how the board operates and how things are done. So we're going to be holding a meeting by probably the week of June 15th. We'll have a public meeting where the board will take up an agenda item to adopt written policies and procedures. So we'll be meeting those deadlines, and we expect to meet all of the other deadlines that are outlined in the executive order, with the understanding that trainings that we're working on for board members with the Inspector General's office from the state, that they're working remotely now. They're not working on business as usual, just like we're not. We're focused on the pandemic. But if things progress and things move forward in fashion that we can continue to reopen things, we expect to meet the deadlines. And in fact, we think we've already met, very close to meeting some of the technology deadlines that we set further out. We'll probably meet them sooner. But when we talk more in detail about E-Plan in particular, we can get more into the weeds on that, if that's okay. I think that covers the ZBA question. There was also a question about ISD, the neighborhood walks, and some of the things that we do in our constituent services division. Community engagement is very important to us, so I'd like to ask Assistant Commissioner Aisha Miller to talk about that.
Good morning, everyone. Some of the questions that were presented, number one was, what is the envision through neighborhood walks? So the intention for neighborhood walkthroughs is to identify the quality of life issues throughout the city of Boston. Inspectional Services Department uses these neighborhood walks to ascertain abandoned and unsecured buildings that could be possibly unsafe and an eyesore to the community, unpermitted work and construction that has been depicted of working outside of their scope of their permit, concerns as it relates to upkeep in private of commercial buildings and private properties. Depending on the circumstances, ISD Constituent Services will coordinate with other city agencies to address these concerns. The second question, how often do they happen? Neighborhood walkthroughs are scheduled weekly by the constituent liaisons, more often in the spring and summer months. However, scheduling does occur in the winter if it's requested. Third, are they done with community neighbors and or civic and neighborhood leaders? So walkthroughs are typically requested by a community or civic group. Anyone from that neighborhood is welcomed and encouraged to attend, along with any interested party. Complaints can also propel the need for a neighborhood walkthrough. And complaints, I mean coming through ISD, through phone, or 311. How is outreach done? Outreach is done by the neighborhood group normally requesting the walk. That neighborhood group will send out the information to their members via social media or email. And we also partner with our ONS coordinators to also get the word out if need be. And that way we can receive a lot of input from our community members in what's going on in that neighborhood. We are intentional in making sure and encouraging folks to come out to these neighborhood walks where we facilitate and we feel like it maximizes the citizen input and participation during the neighborhood walks for the best results. Thank you.
Thank you. We also had a question about language access and what is ISD doing beyond translating documents for language access. ISD works closely with the City's Office of Language Access. We're committed to improving language access. Some of the things that we do beyond translating documents, we have language lines. We are with the, particularly with the ZBA process going forward, we're in our notices, we're gonna be asking folks who need language accommodations to let us know so we can make that accommodation available for them at the meeting. Our bilingual staff is a key part of our language access as well. We've also invested in our technology. Our smartphones, our mobile devices now are enabling greater language access to our staff, not only using translation apps as necessary, we're also using it to use our internal translators and have being able to use the speakerphone function, which, as simple as it may sound, when our staff didn't have a speakerphone, it sort of limits how we could have a conversation with someone else helping us to translate. So those are all things that we're doing. It's not a totality of it. Like I said, we're working with the Office of Language Access, and we're getting back to that, to focusing on reopening type of things. And that is a part of our reopening focus, is to make sure as we reopen and safe, healthy working environments, that we're also improving these other things that are needed to improve our service. And same goes with the fact that we're having remote meetings. We want to have our remote meeting in a way that we want to have the ability for folks to be in a ZBA meeting, for example, and be able to go into a room with everything in that room, the language is translated to meet your needs. So we're exploring those type of things. We know the technology is available out there, so we're working with DoIT, and we're looking to roll those things out in the coming months. Question about ISD outreach. I think Assistant Commissioner Miller talked about that, but I would like to add that we had a lot of plans to things that we were already hoping to have done at this point in the year that would change, like everyone else's plans would change. But we're looking to launch monthly zoning workshops. We're going to continue on that effort. We're just going to readjust how we do it. It's not going to be in-person meetings, most likely at this point. But we're committed to having workshops like we had recently for the contractors. We want to do it for the different industries. We want to do it for community, and particularly around zoning, because we understand that there are a lot of questions, and I think some of it can be resolved. And I think we can gain some confidence if folks had a clearer understanding as to how these decisions were made, and know that they are, and most often, very objective decisions that are being made using quantifiable criteria. So we're committed to doing that, in addition to the neighborhood walks and other things that folks find helpful and informative to the community. So we had a question about technology, which I'm going to ask Assistant Commissioner Kelly Mackey to talk about. ISD, we understand much of ISD's role in terms of what we've been doing lately dovetails with DoIT, and technology plays a greater role. So the question was, what is ISD doing, particularly around access to building plans for review?
Thank you, Commissioner. So I'll speak to this from the ISD perspective, but you'll continue to hear a lot in the course of DoIT's participation as well. Through very close collaboration with DoIT, we've been able to make significant investments of resources and attention into improving the technology here at ISD. We're working to better leverage existing tools and update our technologies to meet our current needs. We're working closely with DoIT to use existing technologies on new programs. So things like STR was a place that we partnered very closely with them to use our existing technologies to support a new program. And then we're also working with them in terms of procurement. So items like our e-plans are things that we look for their guidance and support to determine whether to go out on our own and buy something that meets our departmental needs, or work with them on a more citywide approach. Some of the additional places that we've placed investment are in our staffing. We are in the process of increasing our resources around technology and process improvement at ISD. That includes 2 management analysts that we're currently in the hiring process for and expect to onboard in early fiscal year 21. We also are working with DoIT to onboard 2 project managers, one currently funded and one in fiscal year 21. Those analysts and project managers will help to oversee and push adoption of mobile technologies and new online applications. And then finally, we also have an additional service tech who will be joining our team. We have a fairly small team of IT support here at ISD today. They do a fantastic job, but as our technology use has grown, it's exceeded what we're able to do with current staffing. So having that additional service tech will be great to be able to support staff here and thus provide better support to constituents. We are also investing in new hardware. We are upgrading all of our technology to Windows 10, and we've been able to pivot from desktops to laptops and tablets to be able to keep our staff mobile and flexible, both during this period of remote work, but also in the future. We have a lot of off-site meetings with constituents, hearings over at City Hall. So we're looking to keep mobile and flexible. So that's a quick overview of some of the areas that we're investing in. We are very excited about these incoming resources and what we will be able to take on this year in terms of improving our tools for our staff as well as for the constituents. And we can answer additional questions later in this talk as well.
I'm looking to see if there's any other questions that we... I think we've covered the questions. Actually, there was a question that I recall. I don't have a note here on it, but there was a question about what does ISD mean when we talk about ethics training. One of the goals for ISD is build upon the city's already strong ethics compliance and training requirements, recognizing that ISD staff, with the work that they do, it would be beneficial just to have at least an annual workshop training where we can get into more details about situations that our staff could encounter, and understanding that the decisions that how to make the right ethical decisions, because it's not always black and white. So to the extent that we can give enhanced training to our team, particularly with the work that we do, is something that's important to us. And in addition to that, we're looking for other opportunities to just improve our training and in other ways. So that training may not just be about ethics, but ethics will be a strong part of it. But cultural competency was mentioned. So we're looking to make sure that we're giving our workforce all the tools that we can provide beyond the basics to be the best that we can be. And also to update ISD's ethics policy through our commission's bulletin. We actually have an ethics policy that's actually more stringent than the state ethics law requirements. So it's always good for us to update our staff so they understand the difference between what the state ethics chapter 268 says you can do, as to what, in addition to what ISD requirements are, and how we want them to conduct themselves. So I'll leave it there. I think we've covered most, if not all, and happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Commissioner. I really appreciate you all taking us through so many of those questions that councillors had sent over in the working session. And so I'm posting the question order in the chat for councillors. I want to note that we were joined right after I read the names by Councillor Flaherty at large, Councillor Mejia at large, Councillor Wu at large, and Councillor Arroyo of District 5, meaning that we've got the entire council in attendance at this hearing. And so I think what we'll do now is we'll jump into a round of questions for ISD, and then we're going to go to the presentation from DoIT. A couple of notes, I would encourage colleagues, I think Commissioner Irish and his team did just answer a bunch of questions. So, if they answered your question, we don't need to re-ask it. We want to kind of move expeditiously through, especially since we've got 13 of us on the line here. And then move to the sort of second part of this hearing focused on DoIT. That said, I'm really glad that we've got the DoIT folks on the line, because I think, if there are follow-up technology questions related to ISD, I hope that sort of collectively the team can take those. So as usual, I'll defer my questions and go to Councillor Baiting.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bach. Thank you, Commissioner Irish, and all of your staff. It's very thorough presentation and answering to many of our questions. We're in an evolving situation out in Alston Brighton. BC has just announced their intention to bring their students back in the end of August. I just was wondering about concerns about how our inspectional services are going to respond to possible overcrowding situations in rentals. I know it's always a crazy time out here for moving day, but in the context of COVID-19, it seems a little more critical to address the overcrowding issue. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that, or if you have any thoughts on that issue.
Yeah. So I think when you say overcrowding, you're probably referring to the student overcrowding ordinance, which the zoning amendment, I should say, that limits students to no more than 4 full-time undergrad students living together. We'll still endeavor to enforce that, but you're correct. We are monitoring what's going on, the conversation with the schools, and trying to understand their plans, and also giving our input while they're developing their plans, because we are concerned and would like to ensure that if all students are coming back to campus, that there are plans in place to make sure it's done in an orderly fashion, in a safe fashion, and hopefully in a phased-in fashion.
Very good. We'll keep you posted. I'm sure I'm going to be on the phone to you over the next few months. The other issue was really in terms of a noise ordinance. We've had several complaints about car washes. I don't know if there's a way in terms of enforcement. Is there ways to technology to measure noise output from your department, and is there anything we can do to address those issues?
Yeah, actually, I hope I'm not giving the incorrect information, but I believe the Environment Department actually has the ability to do some enforcement on that. I think they're able to take go out and take readings, and we're all happy to get back to you with more information on that. But I know it's not something that ISD has direct enforcement on in terms of noise levels, and unless if it's related to a construction site, for example, then we certainly have influence in how we can let people do or require that certain things are done at a certain time that's more appropriate based on the noise. But overall noise operation of the car wash, that does not fall with us.
Very good. I think it's an issue with, we have formerly low light industry areas where they had car washes, and now they're developing housing close by. So we're having all sorts of issues coming up. So thank you so much. That's all my questions for now.
Great. Thanks so much, Councillor Braden. Next up is Councillor Flynn, and then it'll be Councillor Asabi George, and then Councillor Edwards. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Bach, and thank you to Commissioner Irish and the dedicated and professional team at Inspectional Services. We appreciate the work that you, especially during COVID-19, our department really stepped up and worked hard and were very professional. So I just want to acknowledge the work that your department has done over this difficult period of time. Worked closely with Dan Manning at the Health Division and Assistant Commissioner Miller and Mr. Lydon in the construction field and building field. So just want to highlight a lot of great work that your staff is doing, Commissioner.
Thank you.
One thing I wanted to focus on, and I only have one question because all my questions were answered, but Airbnb enforcement as invested units, you know, I still see a lot of absentee investors trying to use a loophole to say that they're living there, and they come up with a utility bill or they come up with some other type of bill to cover themselves. But it's basically a hotel, and they're trying to be cute. They're trying to get around these loopholes. And I know we talked about it before, but I just want to see what we can continue doing, Commissioner, to make sure that, you know, if you have an Airbnb, it is properly regulated and people aren't using it as a loophole, as a hotel, and they might provide one document or two documents, but everybody in the neighborhood knows it's not legit.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. You are correct. I know there's one particular case in particular where someone did provide the documents that would meet the criteria of owner occupancy, but upon further investigation and upon close communication with you and with members of the community, you know, we got enough information to trigger us to do additional visits and gather additional information. And so it's going to take that type of partnership when someone is invested in skirting the law. But for the most part, I think the system is working and screening out folks who are not eligible. But those folks, like the one that we're talking about now, will require additional effort from us, and we're certainly happy and willing to provide that. And
thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate the response, and also appreciate the work you did in helping us on that issue. I think we're going to have many of these issues, unfortunately, going forward. And my final comment is one other issue I am concerned with, and you highlighted it during your presentation, but just the proper role of pest control in and around construction sites. You know, is there when pest control takes place by the developer, is there a period of time that they need to continue with their pest control outreach, or how long does that go for And how do we document that to make sure that they actually did it? And, you know, maybe we have to strengthen that program as well, because that's a quality of life issue that I often hear about in South Boston and in the South End as well.
Yeah. So they're required to have pest control in place during the entirety of the project. But you are correct. That's something that we're taking a closer look at. I've heard enough this week that I've scheduled a meeting for next week just to talk to see what more can be done. You know, so we're gonna step up and see if there's anything more that we can do on that. But they are required to have pest control in place, and so we'll have to see what more we can do on top of that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks for taking my questions. And again, the pest control doesn't seem like it's all that huge of an issue, but when you're in the neighborhoods of Boston and you're a district city councilor, those are the questions people really ask us about. So, so those are issues I'm going to stay on top of, and I know your team will also stay on top of. But again, I want to say thank you for the great work your team is doing, Commissioner. Thank you.
You're welcome. We're here to respond to the community's needs. I want to also respond to Councillor Braden, Aisha Miller, Constituent Services. She will, if you can get her the information, look into the noise issue. We also work with the Boston Police Department on some of those noise type complaints. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Next up, Councillor Sabi George, and then Councillor Edwards, and then Councillor Campbell. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner, and everybody else that's on this call, and Chief on this call this morning. On ISD, just to reiterate the rat issue, we've gotten a lot of complaints from across the city on the rats. So just want to double down on just the efforts that need to happen there. And then on the community engagement piece, Aisha has been really wonderful and supportive and accessible as we've had calls about that. But I am curious about sort of the larger effort around engaging the community, thinking about the zoning clinics that you've discussed, and sort of any conversation around increasing capacity so that we reach more neighbors, and thinking in a more sort of normal times how we're reaching out to community and to residents and abutters during sort of the traditional development stage, and understanding that right now we're in this sort of weird place, but sort of under more normal circumstances, and whatever the new normal will be, what's the thinking and the effort around engaging community in the zoning process and when projects come up, both proactively and reactively?
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Actually, we had planned for April, we were going to launch our first zoning workshop for community. I think we had picked, we're going to go to every neighborhood, but I think we're going to start with Mattapan and have a workshop just for Mattapan. We're already working on the curriculum for it, and then things shifted. So the plan now is, as we're refocusing our efforts, we're looking to now set those meetings up again and do them virtually. Also, from a community engagement and awareness standpoint, for May was a planned safety month for us. We had a video that we developed. We had developed outreach material, and our plan was to do a citywide walk to go through every single neighborhood and do some visual safety assessments to give folks door knockers to inform them of things that we saw that wouldn't lead necessarily to a violation on the spot unless it was like urgent. We wanted to educate folks, but we also wanted to remind folks that as a community, we all have a role to play in making sure the city is safe. There are things like buildings over 70 feet are required to give us a affidavit every 5 years, but if it's under that, they're not required to provide anything to us, but those buildings still deteriorate. So we do have plans to have an education campaign to let everyone know that they have as much ability as we do to see things, to address things, or bring them to our attention so we can address them to help keep the city safe. So those are just two examples of some things that have been deferred, but we'll find ways to move it forward as we go forward.
Great, I appreciate that. And then is there any effort to increase capacity or increase the size of your team so that you can take on this greater capacity? I'm trying to, you've got I think a fairly significant or healthy increase, but that's really due to some of the after hours inspections. So just wondering if there's an opportunity to do more of that hands-on, which I think is wonderful. You're going to need probably some more manpower. Aisha can't, as much as she can do a lot, I don't think can do it all.
You don't doubt Aisha, right? No, thank you.
No, please don't confuse that for doubting her. I don't doubt her, but we'd like her to get some rest at some point.
Yeah. So, no, we're thankful. The mayor has invested in giving us more resources. We're adding 5 FTEs with this budget that's been recommended. And in addition to that, we also have to think about vacancies. You know, we have had a challenge to fill some of our vacancies. We took a really aggressive approach, and Director of Human Resources, Mari, I think she's watching, did a great job in the past 6-7 months, and we've reduced our vacancies tremendously. So we don't just have numbers on paper now, we actually have bodies. So we do have more resources that we can devote to this. And we're also looking to keep some of the good things we've learned and how we can expand our universe using technology. I mean, now we're having meetings, workshops with 300 people, you know, and doing it virtually. So I think we'll do some of that. So that'll help us to efficiently spend taxpayers' dollars and use our resources.
Great, thank you very much. And just that's it for questions for me for ISD. Just want to thank you, Commissioner, and your team, because I know that everyone from you down has just been out, stretched out during this time. So just want you to know that I'm grateful for the work that you are doing and your team's doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Sabi George. Next up is Councillor Edwards, then Councillor Campbell, and then Councillor Janey. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you, as all of my colleagues have, to the Commissioner. I also want to thank Aisha for just being incredibly responsive to me. And then I also absolutely want to thank Isd's own Claudia for the work and the amounts of emails that we've been going back and forth with, and just helping us from everything from short-term rentals to parties in different buildings to everything. So, and I have to say that because, you know, she's not only is she Isd's own, but she's grown up in this, the back and forth and service to the community. So I wanted to, in all aspects of the community, immigrants, non-immigrants. And so, Claudia, I really, if I haven't said enough, thank you. I'm saying it again publicly. Thank you so much. So I did have some follow-up questions. Commissioner, thank you. Your data was great. You answered a lot of my questions. My follow-ups are specifically to either just clarify some things. You said that East Boston is getting another another inspector to work with Peter, who's also great, by the way. Peter Keeney has been wonderful and responsive.
Yes, that's correct.
Oh, wonderful. When is that person starting?
Well, he's already started. He's been in training for like I think a week or two now. Very experienced person, but new to ISD.
Okay.
His name is Mr. Lyons, and he'll be there shortly.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm very, very excited about that. And you also said the North End too?
No, in the North End, we already in that particular ward, there are already multiple inspectors.
Okay. Yeah, Brian. Okay, no problem. Just making sure. Then I wanted to check in on the executive order. Thank you for going through all the stuff that you're doing. But there were other deadlines that are very important as well, such as allowing people to file for their plans online, allowing people to access plans that have been filed, having electronic information, contact information of the board available. They were they had different deadlines within 6 months, I think, of the executive order. I'm just confirming that every one of those deadlines will still be met, that there is no delay, and that we're expected to meet those 6 months deadlines.
We still expect to, but I will put the caveat in. There's a lot of things that I expected to do right now that I talked about already that we haven't gotten to. But if the way that things are going now, I have no concern that we can meet these deadlines unless things change drastically. But if that happened, we'd come back and inform you of that.
Does your budget reflect the upgrades, your technological budget for ISD? I mean,
Yes, sorry. I'll ask Commissioner Mackey just to talk a little bit more about that, but I know staffing-wise, we've gotten additional resources dedicated to this for ZBA and also on the technology front. But Kelly, if you will just talk a little bit more of that in detail.
Yes, so those investments are reflected collaboratively in DoIT and ISD's budget. Most of this work we are foreseeing that we will do internally with internal resources, which is why we've grown some of the teams to be able to resource that work.
Wonderful. I'll just take those numbers in. I'm sure you went through them. In terms of the STR, short-term rentals, thank you so much for that data. We knew it was going to be a ramp up, but do you have, and can you post in the chat the link where people can file complaints? So that's my only question, is that so that we can have access to that so they can file complaints. And then finally, on the pest control issue, I've been contacted by the press about just crunching the 311 data, that there's actually been citywide a 31% increase in rodent complaints to 311. And in East Boston, which has kind of struck me, it's been 114% increase in pest issues and infestation. So I wanted to know how you look at data from 311. You know, when that comes in, who's monitoring those kind of upticks or not ticks or whatever, and saying, okay, we need to focus our resources over here with this particular kind of infestation.
So that's monitored by Assistant Commissioner Leo Bauscher. His team, this is their focus. They're on top of the data. I will tell you that when you scrub the data, sometimes, for example, we had one person who filed like 6 anonymous complaints that were all bogus. But with that said, there is an uptick in complaints, and Leo and his team are on top of that.
Okay, so I will just follow up on that. And thank you again for all of your work. And I appreciate you answering the questions up front. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll also add, I know in East Boston in particular, we've seen an uptick, and we've already had some proactive initiatives with our health division and our environmental services division, have done at least 2 sweeps of different establishments in different areas where we saw an uptick in complaints in East Boston. And I know that he had a walkthrough schedule with Councillor Braden before the pandemic changed that date, but we're happy to reschedule that.
Thank you.
Rodents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Councillor Edwards. Next up is Councillor Campbell, then it'll be Council President Janey, and then Councillor O'Malley. Councillor Campbell.
Thank you, Councillor Bach, and thank you, Commissioner, and your incredible team for the hard work. And I have to shout out Aisha. I think she was already given numerous expressions of gratitude, but she's, Aisha, Flavio, Makera, at all of my civic meetings, very responsive. I know you guys have a really hard job, even in the midst of COVID-19. Things have not slowed down for you guys because of construction projects, enforcement. So just wanted to extend my gratitude. Frankly, not waste a lot of your time. I know how busy you are, and I appreciate you coming to the hearing with responses to the questions that were sent. Not every department has done that. So thank you, Commissioner. Saves time, and thank you, Councillor Bach. The only question I have is one, and this is related to, folks are still seeing illicit activity on some of the vacant lots, different parcels. I know we talked about different strategies for that. Curious around the Clean It or Lean It program, or some other strategies around these lots, given COVID-19, given how the budget has obviously or will be shifted because of COVID-19. How do we continue from the ISD perspective and world, from your team's perspective, continue to assist with these lots where we're seeing some horrible activity happen? But again, thank you to your team. I also want to thank Brophy. I saw Pat. Thank you as well for the work you're doing, and I really appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Councillor. You can see Aisha, she's smiling, not only because of the well-deserved compliments, but also because she knows you've touched on something else that was going to be rolled out in May. So the answer is, yeah, the mayor has asked us to come up with new initiatives to address this issue. And we're going to roll it out, not at the date that we had already planned, but where we will be rolling out new plans and ideas on how we can better address this type of issue, in addition to what we're already doing with the recently formed investigations and enforcement team, that collaborates with the fire department, with the Public Health Commission on a regular basis, and that team has been extremely effective, particularly during the pandemic and dealing with the public health type of complaints that began to come our way.
And one follow-up question, maybe you answered this, and I apologize if I missed it. How does the new enforcement team differ from code enforcement, inspectors? What's sort of different there? And I appreciate these updates as well. And I also want to thank Chris English, I know is also on here and has been assisting with problem properties in that line of work too, so thank you.
Yeah. So the difference is, thank you for that question. Code enforcement, as you know, it used to be a part of ISD many years ago, but that team of officers who issue the tickets, the green tickets, they're a part of the Public Works Department. They still work very closely with us, but they're a part of that department. But ISD does have two code enforcement inspectors who are different. Those two gentlemen, they work on enforcing our auto shop ordinances and those type of things. The difference between our I&E team and why it was important that we establish a team is that typically ISD gets complaints that goes to an inspector assigned to a certain area based on what type of work that inspector does. And it's difficult for inspectors with that heavy load for carrying a district to have a sustained follow-up to get the required results for certain types of issues. Some things you can go out and do an inspection for today and tomorrow, move on to something else. But something needs repeated or coordinated approaches in order for us to really resolve and address those type of issues. So that's why we formed the team. So we can have multidisciplinary people there who can plan, do research, go out, make appointments, do team investigations, do follow-up, and work with the appropriate external departments to bring these things to resolution. So, and it's been effective so far. I think there's been over 200 cases, nearly 200 cases in about 6 months.
No, that's really helpful. And it's just great. Kudos to you and your team for sort of creating this, because you're exactly right. It's really important. The cases, there's so many, but to have that sort of triage approach, really appreciate it. And of course, continue to consider us a partner in the work, me and my team, here to support you any way we can. Appreciate the responsiveness, even in the midst of COVID-19, on some of these cases related to the lots and construction sites. So thank you guys again. And Aisha, I'm smiling on the Lean It, Clean It and Lean It, or Lean on Me program that Aisha clearly will just do all by herself. So thank you guys again. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you, Councillor Bott.
Great. Thank you so much, Councillor Campbell. Next up is Council President Janey, and then it'll be Councillor O'Malley and then Councillor Baker. Councillor Janey?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. It's good to see everyone. I want to start by thanking the mayor's team. I want to especially thank you, Commissioner, always being very accessible and responsive. Special shout out, have to join the chorus and thank Aisha as Assistant Commissioner Miller for her leadership and her partnership and for always being available. You were very thorough, so I don't have many questions, but I was hoping to just follow up on a couple. So one, just things related to short-term rentals. I want to share the concerns that Councillor Flynn raised about the investor units. It's been a big issue in my district, and so whatever support you need around enforcement, happy to help in that effort. Also would love some breakdowns, not necessarily in this hearing, but perhaps afterwards, just what is happening in District 7 in terms of the short-term rentals, in terms of the mother-in-law units, in terms of what steps are in place for expanding that in this budget. I know you mentioned in your presentation the overtime for the after-hours inspectors and why that. So if you could just talk about what's the rationale for that change and why that was needed. I understand, what that money is for, but why was that change needed? If you could just repeat that, I missed it in your presentation.
Yeah, so that change is reflects the fact that in the past, for currently, when a third-party inspection is requested, it has to happen off hours. Then we provide the service, and then we invoice and bill the requester and collect payment. It takes a lot of our resources to do the collection, and the collection is not always 100%. So we're making it, we're flipping it around and making it a fee instead of something that we have to bill you for and chase you for. So collections will collect all the money that's owed because you got to pay up front for the service. And we've come up with a fee point that is going to cover our costs. And we got approval through the council to late last year to make that change. We're looking to implement that in FY21, which requires now the money, the overtime is going to be shown differently. In the past, that money still existed, but it didn't show up as overtime because it was just something that was a recovered cost on the city's part.
Excellent, excellent too. I'm been also worried about capacity, you know, as we reopen, but glad to hear that you're saying that empty positions have been filled and that this budget really does provide what is needed. Should you find that you need anything, I hope that you would count on us. The services that you provide the city are really important, and we want to make sure that you can continue to do the work that you were doing. So glad to hear that there's an investment in this budget. Thank you again. That's it for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Madam President. Next up is Councillor O'Malley, then Councillor Baker, and then Councillor Flaherty. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think this may be a record for the least number of times you've had to use the gavel in a Ways and Means hearing. So
it
well
definitely
done.
is.
And I shall keep the tradition. Commission, to your incredible team, thank you for the great work. It's pretty amazing that ISD has finally brought the English and the Irish together with our commissioner and his chief of staff, so well done. Commission, you had mentioned this in your opening remarks, and you did a really thorough sort of overview of some of the questions that we posed, so I think I just missed this. Line item 5200, which is overtime, which includes the biggest increase of this budget, about 1.5 million, just under 1.5 million dollars. But you had said in your remarks that actually that didn't reflect a large overtime increase. Can you just expand on that? I think I just missed what that number reflects.
Yeah, now I probably butchered my explanation of it, so I'm going to ask Assistant Commissioner Kelly Mejia to explain it. But it's really an accounting type of change. Kelly?
Okay.
Yes, I think just explaining this in a few different ways is helpful. But yes, so this is a service that was previously provided as we collected the fees after the service was delivered from the contractors based on the hours delivered in overtime by our staff here. As the commissioner pointed out, that came with a large administrative burden. Our HR staff needed to process the overtime as well as processing the invoices and then chase down those owed fees as collectibles. Our collection rate was good, but it's not at 100%. So some of that funding was not recovered. This change, we based our fee rate and based our budget request on historic data and what we needed in the past to cover this. But the budget is covering the overtime that we'll need to deliver this service, but we will see a parallel revenue stream in terms of the fee that's coming in. And happy to answer follow-up questions if that's unclear.
No, I think that's clear. So while it is an increase, it will be offset by additional revenue that's coming in. So it's more of sort of a net zero. Correct.
And this is all based on historic data. So we will monitor that closely as we go into fiscal year 21.
Okay, great.
So just to add to that.
Yes, please.
The overtime money spent last year was probably the same as what we're budgeting for this year. It just didn't. So our overtime budget may have said 400,000 last year, but in fact, we incurred more overtime costs than that, but it was taken off the books based on the reimbursements and the collectibles.
Sure.
It's not reflected in a different fashion because it's an upfront fee.
No, I totally get that. And let me, add my voice to the chorus, thanking Aisha and just your incredible team. this is my 10th budget, and almost annually we've lamented the fact that and I think many of my colleagues, I think it's been brought up out there questioning, while we value incredibly the great work you do, often feel that ISD is understaffed because the workload is so massive and is expanded. And I fear that as we begin sort of some semblance of a recovery in a post-COVID-19, that's going to continue. So I often ask about overtime. I'd love to see you get more inspectors, and I think that it is so important. We're seeing now obviously a slowdown, but still you've had situations where even during the freeze there were still some contractors who were proceeding, so we had to send inspectors out. There was other work that was left essentially abandoned and not secured, and we've had to send inspectors out. So your job is incredibly important, and everyone on your team I know works incredibly hard for the city, and I would just again urge that anything we can do to make sure that your staffing levels reflect the sheer volume of work we need to be doing. So I will continue to push that. I'm very grateful for the good work that you do. And then just briefly, I guess this is somewhat similar to the overtime. Contracted services, line item 52900 has seen an increase of $112,000. Is that for a particular position?
Kelly?
Yes, so our contracted services include our spending for the ZBA, Board of Appeals advertising, and our scanning microfilm. So those are both fairly dependent on the volume of construction going on in the city, which has been trending up.
Yep.
So we've brought that cost in line with current spending to reflect our actual cost.
Okay. And again, it's $112,000. I don't mean to poo-poo it. It's a large amount of money with a $20 million budget. It's not a driving factor. And I hope, Kelly, your prognostication is right and that the construction boom does continue. Obviously, I think that we're all going to sort of wait and see what the post-COVID world looks like. So appreciate all your great work, everybody. Again, anything we can do to support you, Commission, your team, particularly as it relates to having the proper staffing levels to address the myriad concerns, we stand with you. But thank you all, and it's great to see all of your faces. Be well and be safe. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councillor O'Malley. Next up is Councillor Baker, then it'll be Councillor Flaherty, and then Councillor Mejia. Councillor Baker? Councillor Baker, you there? All right, I think he may have dropped off, so we're going to jump to Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. How are you doing? Can everyone hear me correct?
Yep, we can hear you great.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. And that's good to see Dion back healthy. And sorry you went through that experience, and also sorry for your loss. You were like me. You're wired like me. You were taking calls from the hospital, which obviously I appreciate, and always attention to detail, and also just great, hardworking city employees. So again, good to see you back. And in your absence, obviously you had a great team. I often say, I've said from my first budget here, that the place wouldn't run without Jill Cox. I know her as Jill Gregorio, so she's an unsung hero for the department. Sean Lydon also, in your absence, was stellar. Danny Manning over at over the building over at his division there at in health, doing the inspections and keeping the ball rolling. Housing with Regina Hansen and Sheila Cavalieri, and obviously the environment and rodent control, Leo Boucher, Bobby Chan, and John Ulrich. All unsung heroes of your department, as are so many folks. I know the number of the folks on the screen that I'm looking at, and so many other city employees. We, the Boston City Council, we've put so much on you over the last several years. I was chair of government ops. I mean, between the rental inspections, the sandwich boards, the Airbnbs. I mean, you're a department that tends to do more every year with less. And so I would concur with my colleague, the previous speaker, that we probably should look at getting you more inspectors and giving you more tools to do the job that you guys do. I have to compliment the commissioner in a thorough presentation, answering all the questions that I had submitted through the working session. So no need to re-ask them. I just want to take this opportunity to thank you for the work that you do, for the work that ISD does. A great department in our city. doing a multitude of things, as I had just rifled off from the stuff that Jill does, to Sean, to Danny, to housing, obviously to environment, to rodent control. We are experiencing an uptick in rodent control issues. So I'm sure Leo and his team over there with Bobby Chan and John Elrig and others have things under control. So as we move forward and get through this pandemic and start to reopen, your department arguably is probably going to be one of the ones we lean on the most for guidance as we're dealing with housing issues. We're dealing with businesses trying to reopen. We're going to be dealing with housing issues, health issues as well. So for that, I appreciate all of that and look forward to working with you, Commissioner Irish, and your entire team as we move forward and get through this. So again, good to see you. And again, sorry for your loss that you experienced. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. All right, next up is Councillor Mejia. Councillor Mejia? Councillor Mejia, I see her on. All right, 1 second. Let me just, while I get in touch with her, I'm going to jump to Councillor Arroyo. Councillor Arroyo, you ready?
I am. Thank you so much. And I'm also going to keep you from raising your gavel. So thank you, Commissioner Irish, and everyone else on the ISD team for the work you've been doing. Very grateful, and the way that you answered questions at the beginning of this that were already previously asked makes it so I don't have too many. But I do have two. One, I think you sort of started to answer, and I just kind of want clarification on, which is in terms of the contracting, how many contracts or do you give out contracts? I think for mine, I think there's a contracting cost in there. It's basically $564,000 budgeted for contracted services. If you could just tell me what those are.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, Kelly, you can answer, then I'll jump in.
Yes, Councillor. The majority of that spend is for our microfilm and scanning of plans after issuance. That's for historical records, and for advertising with the Boston Herald for our Board of Appeals work. In addition to that, we do have some smaller agreements, not contracts, but service orders with minority and women-owned businesses, as well as local businesses. That's generally for things like promotional items, outreach, but those are generally smaller. Most of our contracts are done through purchasing.
And just to clarify, so is it just the Boston Herald, or is there a mix of different media outlets there that you also advertise with?
The majority is Boston Herald. I believe we do have some beyond that as well, but the majority of that cost is driven by our the required advertising related to the Board of Appeals.
Okay, thank you for that information. And then the other side of this, which may be your department, may not be your department at all, but sorry, did I mute there?
I didn't hear the question.
We lost you for a second.
I saw. So I said thank you for that. And then on the second question, which may be your department, may not be your department, as we move forward with reopening the city and we put in sort of these health and safety protocols, is it going to fall to you to do those inspections, or is that going to go to code enforcement and public works? Who's going to be responsible for, when somebody calls in and says this business isn't following safety protocol, whose job is it to do those inspections for the city right now?
It depends on what the call is. Most of the calls will probably come to ISD, also to the Health Commission. Some may go to code enforcement, but I think the majority will come to ISD and to the Public Health Commission.
And so I could foresee that that's probably going to be, one, it's probably an entirely brand new situation for ISD. I don't think there's anything else in the same vein. And so in terms of this budget, is there a funding increase that would, I echo, he was the most recent, but Councilor O'Malley with kind of the understaffing. Do you have the money in this budget essentially to meet those needs, do you think, or is there a place there where we could maybe really ramp up some funding to ensure that your needs are met to actually respond to that?
Yeah, we have the funding and the resources to meet the need. And we also have commitment on investments to increase our efficiency and our effectiveness. And a lot of that's going to be using technology. Some of that's going to be improving our processes. But the number of people that we have is sufficient. The work is going to shift, but this is a temporary shift based on an emergency situation. So maybe we wouldn't have another inspection that we might have done may not get done, but we're going to shift and focus on what the current public health emergency requires, and then we'll get back to the routine inspections when this subsides. But we can address the need, and my folks are pretty much public health, public safety folks, so we're already trained to do this type of enforcement, and we're coordinated with the Health Commission and with other agencies. So our goal is that when it comes in, we want to make sure that we as a city just find a way to respond to these needs and not have people bounce around.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you so much to all of you for the work that you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor Arroyo. All right, we're going back to Councillor Mejia. Sorry, there was a technical issue. Councillor Mejia.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
My internet is a little bit unstable. I just wanted to just quickly give a shout out to Commissioner Dion. We both are Dorchester Bears, Dorchester High all the way. And to your entire team for your hard work and dedication. You guys have been extremely helpful to our office, navigating a lot of the calls that we've gotten from constituents. So I appreciate you and Aisha for all her work and making sure that things get done. I just have a few questions. One of the goals of ISD was to make improvements to the CBA. You mentioned that people will be able to request interpretation in advance of CBA hearings. Can you let us know when we can expect that program to be put in place? In addition, in regards to translation, as we think about ways to remove barriers to engagement, what if any opportunities exist for meetings to be provided, food and childcare? We know that those things can be a little bit expensive, but what opportunities exist in partnering up with other nonprofit organizations and other groups and maybe even small businesses to kind of help support removing some barriers to engagement? Would love to explore that and work with you to make those things happen, if possible. And then just curious, can you talk a little bit more about the workshops that you've been holding for contractors? How many have you done so far? How many people have participated? And where were these workshops offered? And were they offered in multiple languages? And thank you again for all that you do.
You're welcome. Thank you, Councillor. So I think the first question was about the ZBA and when we plan to have translation assistance available. We plan to have that in place before we have a first full hearing, which is likely to be near the end of this month, with small project criteria being employed, things that have already been vetted, that type of thing. So we plan to implement as many of those improvements as we can now. The other question was about the workshop that we've had. We had 4 workshops in partnership with the Office of Economic Development. We had them, I think 2 of them were on Zoom and 2 were on WebEx. We used eVite, I think, to get folks to sign up. One of our workshops, I think our first one had a capacity of 200 and sold out quickly. Overall, we've had 5 people attend those workshops, but not attending the workshop doesn't you out, because those are also recorded and edited, and they're on our website and also being shared by the Office of Economic Development. Did I answer? I think I missed the question. You're on mute.
I'm telling you, I am having technical difficulties today. Of course, I'm on mute. No, I was just really curious about also translation as a way to remove barriers and what opportunities, if any, exist to provide food or childcare. Has that been something that you all have explored or considered? And just also wanted to hear about any issues around translations.
Okay. So, we're always trying to assess and improve and see how we can do better with making sure we remove barriers. I'm not an expert on it. That's why we also work closely with the Mayor's Office of Language Access. But when we identify a barrier, we try to find ways to accommodate it. I think we've done that with, particularly with our ZBA subcommittee meetings. Typically during the day, it's hard to get childcare. Those meetings are held on a Thursday evening once a month. So, and we're willing to do things like that. I think having these remote sessions now is also going to help people at this particular time. But as we evolve back into having in-person meetings, then we're open to seeing how we can accommodate people to make sure that everyone gets to participate and have their voice heard.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
I'm not one to hold anyone hostage just for the sake of holding you all hostage. I think you guys have done such an amazing job at answering all of our questions. Thank you so much for the amazing presentation, and looking forward to continuing to partner and work alongside your office to serve our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Councillor Mejia. We'll jump now to my questions, and then we'll be going to DoIT for their presentation and questions. So, Commissioner, I guess one question I had is sort of circling back on the technology piece and the electronic plans review. And forgive me, this might have been in Kelly's or someone's remarks, but just, I know you all had issued an RFP on that front. Where is that RFP? Sort of what's the status of that?
Yep. So I'm going to pivot that to Kelly. Thank you for that question. That's very important to us and important to the ZBA as well.
So that RFP is currently open. We did review bids and we worked closely with DoIT. They were members of our RFP committee. We are holding off on our final decision right now, taking in a few factors, but we did run that RFP, and then we're getting some additional feedback from DoIT on next steps.
Got it. And I mean, is that, without trying to inquire into obviously your internal RFP decision-making process, is that a question of maybe needing to tweak the RFP in some ways, or is it just a question of weighing up the respondents?
So we issued an RFP for a standalone department-specific solution. We've gotten some additional guidance, and I'll let DoIT speak to this in more detail in their portion of the hearing. But we've gotten some guidance from them that we may be able to have an enterprise citywide solution. So we're waiting on feedback from that before making a final decision on how to proceed in terms of a standalone solution.
Got it. Makes sense. And can you walk me through, this is really a layman's question, but sort of what's the goal with that electronic plans? I mean, I know am I right in understanding that it might have both an internal aspect of allowing people not to have to shuttle physical plans around to offices, and then also an external aspect in the sense of people externally being able to look at the things and review them, or what's the goal here?
Yes, I'm happy to speak to this, Commissioner, or would you like to jump in?
I hear so much stuff. So feel free to jump in, Kelly, but yeah, this will serve a variety of purposes. One is that plans right now, they're created digitally anyway. So it's an additional cost for someone to actually have to print out plans. Plans sometimes can get lost. It's a more efficient way to get these plans to the city. The plans are now incorporated into our system, so it would save us on the back end when we're trying to digitize these paper documents to add them to our records. And the review, the back and forth process that happens between a plan examiner and the applicant, that can all be done digitally and much more efficiently at a cost savings to everyone. It also ties into our Board of Appeal process, where if something goes to the board now, all those plans are now, instead of being trucked and driven over to City Hall for a hearing or sent over to the BPDA for their review, it can be shared between departments and worked on in an electronic manner, which is the ideal way for us to be going.
Certainly, definitely. And I would think, would there be an improvement? You mentioned, Kelly mentioned the scanning as a contracted service that we do. I wonder if with the digital plans, they'd be sort of OCR'd such that you could search the text and stuff, and whether that's the case right now when we scan things. Kelly, or anything?
Yes, I can't speak to the specifics of the OCR. The plans, once they are scanned, do come with a series of metadata, so they are searchable by a variety of parameters. We do hope to see that as we move towards electronic plans, we can improve those capabilities. We'll monitor that once we implement the solution.
Great. And I know it also came up at our ZBA hearing, I think a few months back, that I think there's also some concern about the kind of the the timing, like it seems as though there's a big packet of papers that often the board members are getting like right then in the moment. And obviously from a review perspective, that's sort of suboptimal. Once we had a electronic plans capacity, would that also enable us to sort of share the packets further in advance with the members of the board?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And so then I guess I'm just wondering, I know we haven't made a decision on the RFP yet, and I can ask DoIT more about the potential on the enterprise side, but I guess my only concern would be sometimes an enterprise solution for the whole city is like a great thing, but it adds a year or something to the implementation here. And I know there's a lot of urgency around this. So I'm just curious whether that's part of the conversation timeline wise.
That is definitely a part of the conversation. And,
Okay.
and those are things that we're evaluating right now, because we want to get a e-plan system in place as soon as possible, but we want to have a system that can connect to all the agencies that need to be a part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, and I think the council shares that urgent desire. Can I ask you, switching questions for a minute and going back to the question that so many of my district council colleagues have also asked related to rodent baiting. I noticed in the info that ISD sent over to the council that there was the dip this year in number of stewars or sites baited. So it had been sitting at sort of like 550 a year for the last couple of years. And then this year it's projected to be 350. And then you have it targeted to go back up to 500. So I was just curious what happened this year. Is that because you paused baiting during COVID, or like what does that dip reflect?
That was just a clerical situation that we're going to correct. We'll get you some updated information, but we have not seized or paused our baiting. The work has continued.
Okay, so that's just a mistake. That's not the case.
Yes.
Great, that's good to hear. And in terms of thinking about, I'll just say I share Councillor O'Malley and Councillor Arroyo's question about whether ISD can possibly have the capacity without additional resources to support all the kind of health questions that I think are going to arise as we talk about gingerly reopening. And I hear you, Commissioner, saying we'll just sort of shift resources to that for the time being, but I'm hopeful at least that if we have to add capacity there, it's something that we can help fund with maybe CARES Act money or something, but it does seem like you might need to increase capacity. Will the technological work and the sort of changes you made related to the new state sanitary code and training people and getting those iPads and such, like, is that all going to be helpful to us in this work as we?
Well, it's helpful to us, our investment in technology and in creating apps for our health inspectors, for example, an updated app with the new sanitary code. It's helped us to continue doing our work remotely. So we're not as tied to the building as we would have been a year ago. So we can still go out, provide work to our inspectors. They can get the information that they need using technology. So I would say it's aided us.
Mm-hmm. Good. And then my last question would just be, obviously we're all interested in how how ZBA meetings are held in a way that's inclusive and participatory under COVID-19. I think there's also a question about backlog and the question of whether you're thinking about trying to have them, meet weekly to at least temporarily, or, and I know we were already talking before about the possibility to shift more of the non-controversial projects into the sort of Thursday format. Can you just give us any update on that front?
I lost the last part, but I think I understood the question. So yeah, we are looking to shift the agenda for full hearings to more of a small subcommittee type of things that would be on the subcommittee agenda will now go to the full agenda. That would allow us to get some meetings under our belt, fine tune the technology, make sure we're working out all the access and participation concerns that we all share, and that we're all comfortable with the process. But you're right, there are things that are in the pipeline that need to be addressed, but it's a thoughtful process, and the mayor, and I'm sure we all have the same concern, that we want to make sure that when we begin to hear projects that people want to ensure that they can weigh in on, that they're comfortable and confident in what we've put in place. So, I'm looking forward to the next meeting, and then from there, I think we can have an opportunity to have a greater frequency of meetings with shorter agendas to get through the backlog.
Okay, great. No, that's good to hear. Okay, so just before we transition to David Eldis and the DoIT team, I just want to say to councilors, I am going to let the ISD team go as they need to. So if anybody had a burning question for them, you should raise your blue hand. But I think as many have said, you guys did a great job of answering so many of our questions right up at the top. So I really appreciate that, and just want to thank the commissioner and your whole team, and Chief Brophy, who I guess is still here with us, sort of in shadow. Yeah, and to say, Aisha, clearly I need to get to know you better, so I look forward to that.
Madam Chair, if I may, just because my blue hand, I can't find it, I just also want to recognize Aisha. I didn't see her on my screen, but again, utility and fielder for ISD, all-time best, and I just want to give her a shout out and thank her for the great work she does on behalf of our city, and probably one of the ISD employees we see the most as citywide councilors. We're out all across the city, so is an Aisha, so I just want to, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention her great work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. All right, so I don't see any further questions. Again, just really want to thank the ISD team, and I know we're all looking forward to continuing to be in conversation about the ZBA adjustments and everything moving forward as we reopen. So without further ado, we'll now transition over to David Eldis and his team at DoIT. David?
Good morning, everybody. Madam Chairwoman Bach, in terms of the format, what you think would be most impactful with the time that we have, I have some brief prepared remarks, and then if you think it would be best, and I'm not sure if the responses to the questions from the working session we just submitted this morning, so I don't know if the council had a chance to go over them. At the end of my remarks, we can go council member by council member and answer those questions if you think that would be the most impactful way of structuring the time that DoIT has.
Yeah, so I think what would be best is, why don't you do your brief comments? I will note for colleagues, we did receive those answers to the questions about an hour ago while this hearing was underway. So I believe, let me just double check, I believe that they've been sent out by Michelle to all the councilors. So I would just ask councilors if you check your email and just download DoIT's replies, and then and those will also be for those watching at home. That set of working session questions and DoIT's answers will be uploaded and attached to the public notice for this hearing, so that other folks can review them as well. So what I would recommend is that you do your brief presentation, and then we'll just jump straight into questions. And councilors can see what you guys wrote, and then if there's something that they want clarification on or whatever, they can kind of add to that. And of course, also people have other questions that may be raised by your presentation or things they've thought of since. So
that's perfect.
So so please go ahead.
Hey, good morning, Madam Chairwoman Bach, and and good morning to all the members of the City Council joining us on this morning's call. I'm here today as the Chief Information Officer for the City of Boston to testify on Mayor Walsh's proposed FY21 budget for the Department of Innovation Technology, also known as DoIT. I'd like to introduce some of the members of my leadership team that have joined me here today. Greg McCarthy is our Chief Information Security Officer. Jeanette Falvey is our Chief Digital Officer. Alex Lawrence is our Chief of Staff. Michael Lynch is the Director of Broadband and Cable, and Eddie Pinkerton is the Director of Operations. Alex, Mike, Greg, Jeanette, and Eddie, as well as many others members of my leadership team, oversee the work that we do every day and have put a great deal of effort into the planning and projects that are included in this year's budget recommendation. I'd first like to share some information about the mission of my department and some of our recent accomplishments, as well as some of the upcoming priorities reflected in FY21 proposed budget. The Department of Innovation and Technology is a trusted steward of information technology and a catalyst for innovation, enabling city operations by consistently delivering reliable and secure services and innovative solutions, as well as striving for best-in-class customer service. Our continuing goal is to help the city deliver excellent customer service to its residents and its businesses by equipping our departments with technology and support that they need. Additionally, we strive to create a learning culture for our employees that encourages smart risk-taking, creativity, integrity, curiosity, rapid evaluation, and encourage adaptability in the ever-changing technology landscape. At no other time has our mission been tested more than the current COVID-19 pandemic that all Bostonians are facing today, as we eagerly look to get back to the new normal in whatever shape that may take on. DoIT has 6 core areas. Core infrastructure. The infrastructure team manages the city's networks, servers, data centers, phones, desktop computers that are all core to the backbone of the city technology efforts. We aim to deliver infrastructure that is secure, modern, and resilient. Enterprise applications. The application team supports the core application systems that the city uses to run its business, from but not limited to our ERP, our enterprise resource planning system and tax system that manages the city's finances, as well as many other back office systems that sit behind and support many of our customer transactions. The goal of the applications team is to equip the city employees with great technology to assist them in delivering excellent customer service to our residents every day. The digital engagement and service delivery. The digital team runs the Citywide website, social media programs, and many of our mobile applications, including our CRM, our customer relationship management solution that supports 311. Our digital team aims to make information services available via digital services and deliver a friendly, convenient, and accessible experience. Data and analytics. The data team helps the city use one of its most valuable assets, its data, to improve the quality of life for Bostonians and improve overall effectiveness of governmental operations. They build dashboards, create analytical tools, and provide operational support to help departments use data to improve outcomes for our residents. Broadband, cable, and digital equity. The broadband team works towards the goal of a city where every resident and business has access to affordable broadband and internet and the skills that they need to succeed in the digital age. The broadband team centers around encouraging competition in the broadband marketplace and supporting programs that assist our unconnected residents. And lastly, security. There's a tremendous amount of public safety, operational, reputational, and political risk associated with IT security and privacy breaches. While there is no solution that guarantees 100% security, we have adopted an industry best practice and a multi-layered approach to managing cybersecurity risk, which includes people, process, and technology, as well as industry-leading technology. We continue to improve our security posture and address the consistently evolving threat landscape as we continue to invest in cybersecurity, network security, cyber resiliency, infrastructure security, and operational and business continuity in the upcoming years. We strive to ensure that every interaction that our residents have with the City of Boston are safe and secure. We accomplish this by utilizing a full spectrum layered approach to cybersecurity from perimeter, network, data, application, and device security. However, this is not enough. We also are in the process of hardening our overall security framework with a focus on improving the city's overall security culture, which is a vital component to overall risk management. Given the broad portfolio of responsibilities, I won't go into detail on all the projects that we've worked on over the past year, but I will highlight a few of our accomplishments. We have launched a comprehensive citywide cybersecurity and threat assessment to address known gaps, identify new opportunity areas, and assist with project prioritization and road mapping. Developed a formal cybersecurity governance board consisting of senior technology and business leadership throughout the City of Boston. Appointed Michael Hamill as the Chief of Enterprise Applications for the City of Boston. Enhanced the Identity and Access Management Program through integration with other city agencies and applications. We are currently evaluating the comprehensive email DLP, a data loss prevention solution to identify and classify and protect sensitive city data. We began phase 1 implementation of our Verizon fiber contribution to the city's fiber network by interconnecting 74 city facilities using Verizon dark fiber. And we've also began implementing our Crown Castle IRU indefeasible right of use dark fiber service that connected, and our UG lateral construction project, which facilitated the connection of 86 facilities into the city's fiber network. As we look towards FY21, we're excited by what we can accomplish with this budget with the support of the City Council, and a few of the highlights include improved data quality by layering a solid foundation which enable us to fully understand the data that we're working with. This includes such items as an MDM, a master data management solution, clearly defining managing the city's most critical data, develop a formalized data governance board consisting of senior technology and business leaderships throughout the city of Boston. This will be focused on overall management of the availability, usability, integrity, and security of the data used in the city of Boston. Develop a comprehensive roadmap and timeline to the transition of more of the city's physical infrastructure to the cloud. Begin to modernize our base ERP, our enterprise resource planning, and financials HCM, human capital management platforms, to ensure sustainability of the city's core processes. Modernize the permitting platform with enhanced functionality and mobile capabilities for the city's workforce. Upgrade our 311 application to help deliver a better customer experience for our residents. Refresh and upgrade our core equipment running our Boston dark fiber network called BONET. We'll continue with our fiber expansion across the city, which will include 108 new locations across both Verizon and Crown Castle. Continue to develop our cybersecurity framework and build cyber resiliency by leveraging best-in-class security tools and service to harden our overall security posture. We will also focus on a citywide hybrid cloud migration and governance as we continue to move more of our core applications off of our legacy environment. These and many other projects are outlined in the proposed FY21 budget materials. The Department of Innovation and Technology is here to help our government, our businesses, and our residents succeed. Our mission is to support the delivery of exceptional city services through the use of technology. We are not just here to simply provide IT services, but to be a true partner with other city departments in creating great outcomes for the people of Boston. I want to close by saying thank you to a few people, starting off with Mayor Walsh, for his vision and strong leadership, along with his unwavering support as we enhance online service delivery and transform the way the city of Boston delivers services to our residents. I would also like to thank Emma Handy and Justin Sterrett and the entire budget team for working tirelessly to make a very solid budget. And even though our budget was constructed pre-COVID-19, I am confident that given the technology investments that have been made in recent years, that we are on a very solid footing as we focus on the important groundwork to support citywide strategic initiatives. I want to also thank the dedicated people that make up DoIT, who do this hard and important work every day. I'm truly very proud of what we have accomplished together over the past year, and especially over the past 3 months, to support the city of Boston and continuing operations in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak. Our efforts are not always visible, and they are certainly not always glamorous. But as we learn from current events across the country, from governors and mayors alike, that IT operational continuity and the city's online persistence and digital outreach are the backbone to serving residents in a crisis and aid in paving the road to reopening the city of Boston. Our work often takes tremendous collaboration, patience, thoughtfulness, and dedication. However, the importance of this work cannot be understated in its criticality to operational continuity for the city of Boston. Much of what DoIT employees do every day is the core backbone of online communications, public data, software applications, connectivity, digital equity in the city. And lastly, I'd like to say a sincere thank you to the City Council for continuing to support our mission, the mission of our department, and the critical work that we do every day. Thank you, and along with my team, we are happy to take any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you so much, David, for that presentation. Again, we'll jump straight into questions. I'll defer mine to the end. So we'll start with Councillor Braden. Remind everyone the orders in the chat. I'll just remind councillors again that there are some questions, some answers to questions that DoIT sent over. They sent those over just very recently, so I encourage people to pull those up and see what you might need further clarification on, et cetera. So, but Councillor Braden, you have the floor. Councillor Braden, you there?
I have very few questions. Yeah, I'm still here.
Great.
There's lawnmowers and everything going on out here. Yes, I had a question with regard to the ISD support for the clerk's office at the city. I understand that they had an increased workload, and one of the issues was that the technology platform they wasn't necessarily congruent with the demands of the job. So, have you any thoughts on that issue?
I mean, we have focused strongly on the executive order once that, that came out, and we tried to respond to that quickly. I will let Alex Lawrence, my chief of staff, who's really been kind of leading the effort on ISD, dig into more of that response.
Sorry, this is the city clerk technology, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
The lobbyist registration, is that right?
The lobbyist registration was the one issue that seemed to break the camel's back this year, and it caused a lot of extra workload because they were having to manually, the technology just wasn't supporting the effort, and they were having to manually record lots of data that should have been able to capture remotely, and it was making a lot of extra work. So that was a concern that was brought up at one of our meetings.
Yeah, so we're definitely working closely with the clerk's office to ensure that they have what they need. As the executive order passed, we stood up a temporary solution to basically meet the needs and make sure everything was available to the public. So we have some improvements that we can make to that to make sure the burden on staff is less burdensome.
Very good. And thank you so much for all your work. Without the technology support, that we would not be able to do a large amount of all the things that we've been doing in this incredible emergency. So thank you so much for all of your team, for all of your efforts. And that's all my questions for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden.
Great, thank you, Councillor Braden. Next up is Councillor Flynn, and then it'll be Councillor Asabi George.
Thank you, Councillor Bach, and thank you to David and your and the DoIT team for the tremendous work you're also doing in the city. A lot of my questions were already addressed and that you covered them, so I don't really have any questions other than, can you talk a little about some of the outreach you're doing to residents in public housing, especially residents that don't have the adequate technology or services, computer technology, to engage engage the city departments on 311 electronically. What are your thoughts on that?
So that's how I look at that, and how we've addressed that kind of, especially as we moved into COVID-19 response as the city, is in a bigger topic, what we always kind of talk about on digital equity and the digital divide, and our unconnected residents, and how they will interface with the city, especially during the crisis that we've been dealing with over the past 3 months. One of the responses that we had quickly pivoted and started to equip a lot of our residents with is Wi-Fi access. We ordered a lot of hotspots that we have kind of deployed to a lot of different commissions, from language access to Age Strong. Probably a week before even BPS closed its doors for schools, I was on the phone with Verizon ordering 4,000 hotspots, to get ready for the possibility that this was going to happen. So these are the items that we are looking at on finding ways to connect our residents, and looking beyond COVID-19 and wanting to really kind of address that and connect a lot of the individuals that are having some technology challenges, whether it's a device or whether it's broadband connectivity. These are the issues that, and before I pass it over to Mike Lynch, these are the issues that both Mike and I talk a lot about in finding ways to drive competition with some of our vendors to have very favorable offerings financially to service these people that are not connected. And where we're looking at our broadband deployment, our dark fiber deployment versus wicket-free Wi-Fi versus competition within our internet service providers to bring broadband into people's homes. These are topics that we have been working through leading up to the COVID-19 crisis, but really doubling our efforts during the COVID-19 crisis. So I will pass it over to Mike Lynch, who's been kind of spearheading a lot of these efforts.
Thank you, David. Hi, Mike.
Thank you, David. Hi, Councillor. How are you?
Good. How are you, Mike?
Very good. Can you hear me okay? Sorry.
Yep, we can.
Great. As David mentioned, we've got a few projects going, and I think the council remembers them because the council has been supportive of them. Comcast has been our longtime cable provider in the city, but more recently, over the last 2 to 4 years, we have had Verizon come in as a competitor. Both companies aggressively seek to serve our city residents and public housing. Verizon is building out, and Comcast is meeting with tenants and introducing them to Internet Essentials. Internet Essentials is the Comcast affordable broadband package. It is essentially $10 a month. When COVID started, Comcast offered the Internet Essentials product 2 months free for the first year, so it would essentially be $100 for the first year of service. This is a pretty valuable contribution. BHA, DoIT are working with Comcast to do their Internet Essentials program to see who's interested in doing that. As David mentioned, as a short-term solution during COVID, I think we distributed somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 tablets and hotspots to vulnerable populations, many of them in the BHA. We did that with the help of Age Strong, our elderly commission, the BHA, and 65 social service agencies. They came in quickly, and we got them out the door probably within a week or 10 days to make sure that people were not unengaged. This has been a point, I think everybody recognizes that COVID has caused quite a bit of isolation for elders in our homes and in our MDUs. So this has been one effort to address it, and more going forward. We've been meeting almost constantly with the BHA and with Comcast and Verizon to offer solutions. And you know, it's our job to regulate Verizon and Comcast, but I have to salute both companies as being very responsive over the last 3 months to the needs of the city and the needs of the city's residents. I think you remember that there was a hospital established out in Brighton for COVID care. Verizon was out there, I think, on day one, digging a trench, making sure there were internet connections and Wi-Fi capability in that building. Some of these hotspots went to the field hospital that was at BCEC. There was a very quick response on the short-term solution. Now we're looking for the more long-term solution. One thing that COVID has taught us is that platforms that some seniors may have chose not to use is now becoming a necessity, and we're seeking to address that. I think later in today's hearing, we will be touching on that when we have the PEG Access Fund review, because Tech Goes Home is a crucial part of that. Through the council and the mayor, the city funds Tech Goes Home, and we like to make sure that they know where our focus is. And our focus right now clearly is the vulnerable populations who we're discovering are having a very hard time during COVID, staying connected and staying engaged. I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Yes, it does, Michael. Thank you to Michael, thank you to David, and to all the dedicated DoIT team that's here, that's doing a tremendous job. And just want to remind you that I represent probably the most residents living in public housing, so that is a very important issue for me. So again, want to say thank you to your team for being very responsive on this important issue.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bach.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Next up is Councillor Asabi George, and then it'll be President Janey, and then Councillor O'Malley. Councillor Asabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you again, David, and your team for sticking it through with us. I also just want to thank your staff, your extended team, and in particular, the 311 call takers, as this is a really challenging time. And I know that 311 in particular is taking on a lot of the responsibility and a lot of the heavy load as the city hall is shut down to regular sort of business, and some of the work has been shifted online. My calls are actually, my questions are actually about 311 and its sort of relationship to or response to COVID-19, as well as some of the regular work of 311, because it's been a real tool for our residents and constituents across the city. So non-311 questions. One, back in March, I had filed a hearing order to look at the possibility of expanding the offerings on the 311 app and the website to include, and by extension, it would need the phone call, the call taker to have this information too, or be able to link to it. But I'd love it to include voter registration and online SNAP education for around food access, locations across the city of Sharps collection kiosks, locations of detox and recovery beds and other substance use disorders, as well as the resources and the links to handle domestic violence calls or mental health calls. So anyone calling in the midst of a crisis, how are we able to link them? So I'm just wondering if you have the capacity and the financial ability to expand access to include these services, both online, the app, the website, and for call-in.
So, so all very good points and very good options for 311 and very important for our residents, as you said, in the wake of this COVID-19 crisis. And a lot of people really isolated at home. A lot of these issues are kind of bubbling to the surface. We're excited to continue to explore all these options are on the table as we work with the cabinet on our engagement, Jerome's cabinet, who really houses the lion's share of 311, to talk about what is next for 311, both on the back end and also on the mobile app side, and how much. And Jerome and I have had numerous conversations as we look to, start going into the upgrading of the 311 application, both on the back end and on the front end. What we want to include, what has been really kind of on our bucket list of items, and some of these have been raised, and I think it's a great opportunity to work with the council and work with Jerome's cabinet on our resident engagement to make sure that we have an application that is resident facing, that really meets the needs of our residents. So, all very solid points. And as we get closer to moving to upgrading our 311 application, both on the front end and on the back end, we'd love to have additional conversations around what that should be looking like.
Great. I'm happy to send sort of our list and again, I appreciate the thoughtfulness that you've already put into some of this. We think about the calls that we get through our office and the work that we've been doing, and when we're working with our constituents and residents across the city, the things that they need direct access to, and 311 is such a great tool to have. So it should be able to link to the things that residents need. And when I think about any resident calling that might be in crisis, I would hope that there might be some funding for training of your 311 operators on the live end to respond to if there is a distressing call for someone who is in need of mental health services. Is any of that training happening, whether it's a mental health first aid piece or sort of the necessary response, because it can't be call 911. There's got to be some sort of warm handoff and an ability to understand the response to that distressing call. So I don't know what training goes in for 311 operators. I do know that a lot of them are on the younger side, which is fine, but that the training and sort of the life experience in dealing with a distressing call is important to me.
So one thing is that I can answer this to a certain extent. I think maybe the constituent engagement, our resident engagement cabinet, Jerome, might be the better person to answer this question, but I know that this has come up, especially over the last 3 months, between Jerome's cabinet on our constituent engagement and Marty Martinez's cabinet in HHS, and also through our H Strong when senior citizens call, also with, looking for additional services, that there is training going on between all three of them, because the way that 311 has been positioned since early part of March when COVID-19 really started to ramp up, is a lot of the calls go through 311, and then there's a warm handoff to all the other departments that then will support our residents that are calling in to 311. So
Thank you, David. I see the gavel, and I do have one more 311 question, and I appreciate the opportunity to continue this conversation offline.
Okay.
We had filed a resolution last week, and the Attorney General has been working on a line for employees to call should their employer not be opening and following safe protocols with business practice. I wonder if 311 is tracking any calls, COVID-related calls, especially around thinking about health and safety calls, and what is the protocols to responding to those. And then is there a way to make sure that we are connected and thinking about the way that we're fielding calls and responding to calls and tracking calls on worker complaints? So in thinking about those safety protocols as we prepare to reopen a lot of our workplaces across the city.
No, very good question as we start to talk about how we are going to open up the city and making sure that if people are not following the appropriate guidance, that is being called out. I do not have that answer on whether we are tracking that, but I can definitely find out and then circle back with you.
That'd be great, thank you. And the time's running out, so I do have questions for the second round, but look forward to a follow-up conversation offline about really increasing and improving the capacity of 311 so that our residents have access to the tools they need. Thank you for everything that you do, and I really do appreciate that the work of DoIT is truly the behind the scenes work that keeps our city moving, and appreciate all of your staff and employees for making sure that we remain connected to one another during this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sabi-George.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Sabi-George. Next up, Councillor Janey, and then it'll be Councillor O'Malley and then Councillor Flaherty. Council President Janey.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I want to thank the team. I think we all have a deeper appreciation for the work that you do now that so many of us are relying upon technology in a different kind of way. So thank you so much. And I want to thank Councillor Braden for raising the issue that the clerk was having. Could you guys speak just to the capacity? I'm really concerned about capacity with all of our city departments. Just talk about the capacity and whether or not you feel like this budget speaks to your needs, given all that we have to respond to, as well as I think what this has done for many of us is it's opened up new ways of engaging constituents. Many of us have been trying to engage and wanting to engage in new ways and utilizing technology to do just that. And I think this sped up the timeline for us, whether we were ready for it or not. And so I'd be interested too in your thinking about how we use technology to engage, particularly around language access, just engaging people in the different commissions, boards, et cetera. So if you could speak to the internal capacity and then how we can really engage externally.
So right now we've been able to, and one of the things I mentioned in kind of my opening remarks and how I was impressed with how easily my team could easily kind of pivot to take a centralized workforce and decentralize them. And something that was a Herculean effort on a good day. But with that being said, right now, we've been able to leverage our existing resources to meet the demands of our present day challenges. The difficulty comes where we don't know what's coming next. We don't know if there's going to be another spike or another surge, and what's going to happen as we start to open up the city. And if one of those surges does happen and we start to move back a little bit, there's a lot of, it's a bit fluid. So we need to remain very agile. But with the resources that we have now, I think we're in very solid footing.
That's really good to hear.
Yes. But that being said, because we don't know what's around the corner, as we continue to ramp up services, we'll collaboratively work with our administration and finance cabinet, as well as the council, to determine any additional services that we may need to provide as the year starts to unfold and we start to address challenges that we did not see coming.
Exactly. I appreciate that. Just thinking about, on the council side, if you could talk about an update regarding SIRE. I know many folks have been using Zoom, including the council, but there's a desire to get the entire city to move toward WebEx. If you could talk more about that rationale, particularly as it relates to safety and security with our work, and how we engage the public. So important for me as president, whatever platform we use, that we're using a platform that can really engage the public in our work. So if you could talk give an update on SIRE and talk about the desire to move to WebEx and what that will do for the city and the pros and cons, because I understand that nothing is ideal, nothing is perfect. So, what do we gain? What will we lose, et cetera?
So on the SIRE initiative and where that RFP is and whatnot, I will pass that over to Alex Lawrence. I know that she was really kind of spearheading SIRE and where that is now. I believe that the RFP did go out and we did get responses back. But if I'm not mistaken, and Alex, keep me honest here, is that is shortly right around the time that COVID-19 broke, and that's when everything kind of halted. But I will let Alex speak in more detail on where we are on SIRE.
Excuse me, and the details of the RFP and exactly where that is, I've been on parental leave for the past 16 weeks, so excuse me for not knowing, but we can get back to you on that. Thank you very much. But we do need to revisit, I think what we've learned throughout the duration of this crisis is that we really need to think about what are the right tools. We've learned so much about how to engage digitally that I think we didn't know in the past 3 or 4 months. So I think there are some specifics that we really need to dig in and potentially consider some slight tweaks to the RFP to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the demands, just because we're learning as we're doing this. I'll hand it over to Greg to specifically talk about security on certain platforms versus others. But understanding exactly what feature sets are there and how we can improve public meetings is something that we're currently working on.
Wonderful. And I'd love to support that. So if there are new drafts that you're thinking about or language that we could be helpful, particularly folks on central staff who are leading that work, I'd love to make sure that they are plugged in and have an opportunity to give perspective from council as well as the council president's office. I see a gavel. I do have more questions around WebEx as well as how we close the digital divide. I heard about the $10 a month program, sounds great, but I do have more questions. In the interest of time, if there will be a second round, Madam Chair, I'm happy to wait for that.
Yeah, I will do a second round for councilors who have second round questions. So.
And if there's a response to the WebEx, I'm happy to take that now and then do the digital divide and other questions in the second round.
So I will do the Zoom topic very quickly and quickly hand it over to Greg. So where we landed on, I know that Zoom has been of top of mind of a lot of people lately. And where I landed on this topic when it first came across my desk is the city of Boston had made certain investments in what they call VCT or video conferencing technology back 6 years ago when we moved from Microsoft to Google. Part of the Google suite is an application called Google Meets. But because we are a centralized workforce, not a lot of people were doing video conferencing. So that's probably why a lot of people did not know about it. So from my position, and before I head it off to kind of more the security side, it's really finding an opportunity to leverage the investment that the city has already made in a video conferencing technology that is not a recent investment. That is one that we have made a number of years ago, and that we continue to renew every year. But it apparently a lot of people did not know, and maybe it does not fit every use case, which is why WebEx also can play a part in that as well. From maybe small team meetings, as we start to talk about as we open up City Hall again, what are meetings going to look like in City Hall, or with half people in City Hall and half still working remote? But it may not hit all use cases where meetings may be 1,000 or more people, like it's very common in business development. Whereas maybe that is more of a use case for a WebEx platform. But I will pass it over to Greg McCarthy, who's the Chief Information Security Officer, and we can talk about recent information that we had heard around Zoom and what our position is and what our guidance is.
Thank you for the question. So with regards to WebEx versus Zoom, many of the video conferencing platforms have very similar capabilities, just used in different ways. As David mentioned, we are interested in pushing people towards WebEx and Google Meet because we have an investment in those platforms. There have been known security concerns with the Zoom platform that is specific to Zoom. So from a security perspective, we're working to analyze the business usage of Zoom and understand how city agencies are using Zoom and work with those city agencies to successfully transition them off of the Zoom platform onto a WebEx platform that can meet the capabilities.
I can follow up offline on some more questions there. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, next up is Councillor O'Malley, and then it'll be Councillor Flaherty and then Councillor Mejia. Councillor O'Malley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, Mike, to your team, thank you for the great work you're doing, the incredibly important work that you're doing. Some of us on this call are old enough to remember when City Hall didn't even have voicemail, so it's great, which wasn't that long ago. So it's great really to see the embrace of innovation, of technology, and how it helps us do our jobs. Particularly interesting is just how people have adapted. I mean, I think of my parents who were scared to death, they're in Florida, of doing the family, or not scared to death, they had concerns about the first family Zoom call, and now, you know, my mother is a pro in teaching her friends how to do it and how to do it well. She's even been able to one-up me on some of the background. So it's great to see how people, how technology has helped us weather these incredibly difficult days, stay connected, be able to do our jobs. And I'm just very, curious, just sort of briefly, David, give me, 30 seconds or a minute, ways that as we sort of transition or begin the slow and painful transition back, from this, and who knows when that will be, ways that you really see your office sort of continuing that, allowing, it's going to be quite a while before City Hall is the bustling building that we remember and that we love. So what, just very briefly, ways that you think, your job has changed now compared to 6 months ago in terms of offering better services virtually for the people of Boston?
So one of the things that we had to do very quickly as we looked at how our environment is changing, how our workforce left City Hall and started working throughout the city of Boston and trying to find ways to connect them. And I think I spoke about this in my previous answer, is I don't think a lot of people really did a lot of video conferencing technology unless it was an outside person inviting one of us to a call, because we were all pretty much centrally located. And most of it were just conference calls on the phone. So this gave us an opportunity to really kind of reach out. And to your point, I completely agree with you. I think it's going to be a long time before we are all in a conference room together. Whether, and I know there's some question about whether 6 feet is the safe distance or if it's actually more. There's so much that is information that is coming out daily about the COVID-19 virus that we did not know the day before. So yes, it's going to be a while before City Hall is the bustling building that we know it to be. And that is where, my department needs to evolve and change. As we stood now, we made a lot of investments, or we made a lot of changes to our current infrastructure getting laptops for our employees so that they can work at home. Some of them did not have broadband at home, so getting them connectivity at home, finding ways to stand up our infrastructure to have more of the, having more of the outside environment, people outside of our network coming into our environment versus sitting in our environment going out. So there had to be some changes in our configuration, such as our virtual private network, or what they call a VPN, allowing people to connect into our city network. I think not knowing, I mean, no one has a crystal ball and can determine what is next. And is there another spike coming in the winter? And if so, what does that mean? And what that looks like? We need to continue to look and find ways to support our people remotely as we work very closely with the A&F cabinet and the operations cabinet on our reopening plans and what that is going to look like, maintaining safe distance and plexiglass and seating arrangements, even within my own department, and whether we're doing even and odd days to get the staff in here. I agree, it's going to be a long time before everyone's full staff is all in City Hall. And
so I think you touched upon it very well, and it's really sort of twofold. It's both, and this is where your job is enormously important. It's both providing for the safety and security of the talented men and women who are City of Boston employees, but also looking at ways that we can better work with, deliver constituent services better. For the first time ever, you can now request a birth certificate online. That is so monumental, and particularly for my newer colleagues. I mean, there have been dozens, if not 100 times, where I've had to go down for a constituent and just stand in line, which I'm happy to do. It's part of our job, but just to make it easier. So I guess the second question, just sort of briefly, are we looking at other constituent services to move them to an online or a digital platform to allow access for constituents in the neighborhoods?
Yes, absolutely. And I see the gavel up, but I wanted to pass it over to Jeanette Falvey, who is our Chief Digital Officer, who's really running point on a lot of these efforts to move a lot of these constituent services online. Jeanette, if you would.
That's fine. There's still 2 minutes when the gavel goes up.
Oh, okay.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that question. It's actually been a priority of the digital team for as long as I've been here, going on 3 years and previous, to bring as many city transactions online as possible. So even predating the COVID-19 crisis, we want to make sure that our services and our transactions are as accessible as possible. It came to our attention even during this crisis that there are some folks that are still very determined to come into City Hall to pay in cash. But of course, that's probably a decreasing number of folks these days. But that being said, we still have to be mindful and we'll likely still have to provide in-person accommodations for a lot of these folks going into the future. But that being said, we're taking a look at every transaction that the city is responsible for and needs to accommodate, and we're looking to see what technology we can apply there in order to make that easier and more accessible for folks. It will be a multi-year process. Yeah,
No,
it'll be a multi-year process.
And I would just urge you, Jeanette, that's great to hear. Thank you for your good work. Work with us, particularly the district councillors who handle the bulk of constituent service requests, to see if there's maybe an opportunity for some good partnerships there. That would be terrific. And then to that end, I guess I would just make a request. I'm a big proponent of 311, have been using it for years. When I was first elected, I would literally at house parties do tutorials to try to get more people to use it. The biggest change that I've noticed with 311, and this may be more of a Jerome question, but often now 311 is routing calls directly to the district councilors' offices, which is great. What's not great is that we don't have the same access to some of the back-end information. So this is a request I will continue to make until I'm blue in the face, but anyway, we can have access to some of the sort of the back-end data collection for 311 to both help all of us do our job and deliver better constituent services is my request. So thank you, Madam Chair. Commish, thank you to your incredible team. Mike Lynch, I miss seeing you around the neighborhood, but you look well and healthy, and great to see all of you guys be well and safe out there.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Malley. Next up, Councillor Flaherty, and then Councillor Mejia. Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see the Commissioner. I know that we as a body have been asking you to do more. Again, I referenced it earlier with rental inspections, obviously Airbnb, and most recently the lobbyist legislation that I think, obviously some argue it's a little onerous to do 4 times a year. And I think as a body, we may have to look at that. But I know that we had some initial glitches as it rolled out. And I know that your staff, Alex Lawrence, has been great to work with on behalf of the clerk's office as well as my office. It still has to be done manually. And you got, somewhere between 400 and 500 potential registered lobbyists who each have to do it manually for each of their clients in those entities. So we need to, I think, find a way where they can fill out the application and maybe it automatically uploads as opposed to having it be individually uploaded. And again, it has to be done 4 times a year. So that's sort of the pushback we're getting from folks. They understand it. They want to participate. They want to register. We just may have to tweak it on our end. So, and I know Alex has had a front row seat for it. So I want to appreciate her efforts on your behalf. And on the same token, I probably should have mentioned Claudia Correa and Tanya Tillery earlier on the short-term rental. They've been great to the council, but also working with DoIT. And as I referenced, we're going to be asking you guys to do even more as we're encouraging folks to try to be able to do things remotely and in sort of the new norm moving forward. And so Councillor Wu and I had co-sponsored a matter recently that was signed on by almost, if not all of our colleagues, just identifying ways that we could use technology. Councillor O'Malley just referenced it, so that we can prevent folks from having to make the trek all the way into City Hall and circle the block looking for a parking spot, try to find a meter, get a parking ticket, etc., when they could easily just get things done online. So we're going to be pushing a little more pressure on you guys to sort of find ways that each and every one of our departments can get kind of brought up to speed and allow folks to be able to transact city business online. And so those are the challenges. But and I see that Claudia has joined. Claudia, I had referenced the great work you and Tanya do with my staff and on the short-term rental, but also how we've put additional pressure on DoIT. The council has with respect to the new things, the new regulations that have come online that require DoIT to be an equal partner here and making sure that we have the technological advances to be able to perform, what we're trying to do, what we're trying to create legislatively. So, and you and your staff have played a great role, Claudia, as David and his staff. So that said, if there's a way we could either legislatively, we may have to tweak it on our end, David. We need to hear that feedback from you and Alex. If you think there's an inherent flaw in the legislation, we need to hear from you. So because we're in the position to make that change. And we are hearing from folks that 4 times a year is onerous. If that's the problem, great. We're also hearing from folks that have to manually, after they fill the application, they have to manually upload it for each and every one of their clients and or entities. Again, 4 times a year. So I'd love to hear your perspective. Is there something that we as the council could be doing to sort of make that a little sort of easier for you guys and or to sync it with your technology? Or is it going to be sort of a continued work in progress and we're going to have to continue to work together until we have the technology to support what we're trying to accomplish? So I want to, again, I'm following up on my colleague, Councillor Braden's initial question early on in this hearing. Thank you, and I'll sit by and.
So what I'll do is, Alex, I'm not sure if you had some initial thoughts, and I could chime in at the end on the thoughts around short-term rentals and what could possibly be the next step and our thoughts around how that evolves.
Specifically on the municipal lobbying technology, as I said to response to Councillor Braden's office, I definitely think there's room for improvement there. And I think it would be a great idea for us to revisit the requirements of the ordinance to sort of match the challenges that we have with the technology with the challenges that are just sort of built into the extensive reporting period. So happy to dig into that, and we'll definitely get back to you.
Okay.
Great, thank you, Alex.
Great, thank you so much, Councillor Flaherty. Next up is Councillor Mejia, and Councillor Mejia.
Hi, yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner, and your entire team for all of your amazing work. I just have a few questions in response. And thank you also for answering all of our questions. I just have a quick follow-up. In your response to our question about language access, you mentioned that your office relies on strong partnerships, particularly with the language and communications access team. Can you talk a little bit about how frequently you work with them, about how long does it take to get your team to get something translated and uploaded onto the website? I have more questions. I don't know if you want them one at a time or what would be best.
We could do them one at a time because they might go to different subject matter experts. But in terms of the language access to the website, I will pass that to Jeanette.
Sure, thank you. So to answer your question, it really it depends on the length of the text that requires translation. But backing up, we're in communication with the Office of Language Access pretty much on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day, particularly since the COVID-19 crisis began. But even prior to that, this is an ongoing conversation we're having with all departments to make sure that as they're putting their content on Boston.gov, we're asking them if they're not already coming to us, is this something that should be translated? Is it critical content and information? And wherever possible, we're taking sections of that and putting it out on social in a way that is meeting our language needs. It's been a very thorough effort since the beginning of this crisis to ensure that we're getting this information out on text alerts, on the website, on social media, in all these languages, and even transcribing our videos as well, having folks speak directly in additional languages or providing captioning services. So we've been very thorough, but it's something that will always need more work. And honestly, working with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement as well, talking with them and our other partners in key departments that are very front-facing, we're always asking what feedback they're getting that we can take and learn from. Everything from not only the language we use, but how do we present this information graphically? So there's a lot that my team does with graphic design and our social media content on Boston.gov. How can we make sure that our residents feel represented in the designs that we put out? So we're asking these critical questions of ourselves every day.
Thank you for that. And just to kind of quickly follow up in regards to translation, I know you had, someone had mentioned utilizing something about Google Translate. Are you using Google Translate for information on the website? And if so, just curious whether or not that translation is then also vetted and reviewed by maybe perhaps a native speaker, because sometimes things literally do get lost in translation. Just curious.
Yes, you're correct. We are using Google Translate as an optional service, so visitors to Boston.gov can select that, and that will do and provide machine translation for any of the content that they're viewing. It does not kick off a process to have that go through additional human-based translation for content and pages where it's very critical that we make sure that the translation is absolutely correct and nothing is lost in the translation, as you said. We work that through approved vendors that have been identified through the Language Access Office. That can take upwards of a couple of days, depending on how lengthy the content is. If it's something shorter, then we'll leverage the team of volunteers, the amazing volunteers across the city that are giving their time to provide a second look and translation of shorter text. So, for example, all of the coronavirus information pages that we've translated into the 10 languages and the short links that I've provided, that all went through proper translation with the vendor. So that's all been human-based. And if you are visiting that page and you've selected to use Google Translate, it will not override it. So those pages are basically taken out of that service. So you'll get the better translation for those.
Okay, great, thank you. And then just really quick, I know that when the rental relief fund was put out, I'm an exponential learner, so I just filled it out just so that I can learn, so that when people called our office for support, I would be able to walk them through the process. But I know that with Google Forms, things often can just be manipulated, including, I put that my name was test form, just to, just because whatever. But anyways, I'm just curious, like how is DoIT playing a role in making our online applications more secure?
Jeanette or Greg, you want to take this one?
Sure, I'll initially take it and then Greg can fill in any more details. We have a couple of options for form-based applications, as you mentioned. So for certain things, we will suggest Google Forms. For deeper applications that require more workflow and notification across multiple departments, more transactional, we might use our new tool called AgilePoint, or we'll even use more custom development, leveraging the development resources on my team. So it really is a matter of looking at the requirements, looking at the security needs, to make sure that we're providing the best experience. And we have a couple of tools in our tool set for that. So I'll let Greg fill in any more details.
Sure, thank you. So as far as the security of Google Forms, Google is a expert at cybersecurity. Their platforms are very secure. The example you provided was around data validation, which we would probably leverage a more sophisticated tool than Google Forms. As Jeanette mentioned, there's a slew of forms tools depending on the needs of the department or the agency that's creating those forms. So there's capabilities around doing data validation, so you can't enter a fake name in that scenario. But if there's no data validation on those fields, which is managed either by the application or the person creating the form, that's the only way to prevent that.
Okay, great. And then my last question is, earlier you guys mentioned that you have dramatically increased the number of competitive bids over the past years. How many bids is that, and how many of these bids actually went to minority women businesses?
Eddie, you want to take that one?
It's a great question. I don't have those numbers in front of me right now, but I will definitely provide them to you post this hearing.
Good. Thank you. And again, thank you again for all your hard work. Looking forward to working with you once we go back to the office. And but thank you for everything that you have done so far. It's been a great transition, and I know you are on the back end making it all happen for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thanks so much, Councilor Mejia. We'll jump to my questions now, and then I know we've got a couple people who have been waiting patiently on public testimony to speak specifically to the PEG Access Fund, so I do want to have those folks go while we still got the DoIT folks here to answer any follow-up questions. So I'll just ask, one thing is just a follow-up from my questions to ISD related to this question of the electronic plans and in terms of an enterprise approach, what would be the sort of what would be the other city departments that doing something like that would help you use this for?
Alex, you want to assist?
So I think Councillor Bach, you hit on a perfect explanation of this when you asked the question to ISD, sort of what are the trade-offs between doing an enterprise citywide solution versus doing it expeditiously and just approach what inspectional services needs. Plans do go across a bunch of different agencies. They touch, depending on the size of a project, they touch the BPA. They could get reviewed by, I won't try to list every single department, the Parks Department, Historic Society, sort of historic landmarks and historic association, depending on the needs of a project. So really we want to make sure that we can meet the needs of the executive order and get the zoning board of appeals cases up as fast as possible. And basically right now we're evaluating the differences in technology to weigh those trade-offs of what can we do today versus what can we expand to do. Regardless of what we do, we will choose a solution that can be scaled across the city eventually.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I won't try to intervene more in that conversation. I just, I know how urgent the ISD implementation is for the council and for our constituents. And I have had some experience with enterprise software solutions and their time scale as well. I was wondering, and Alex, in terms of, again, won't go too much into depth on it, but the lobbying, my understanding is that part of what we did when we passed the lobbying ordinance was to sort of jerry-rig an ISD database solution in order to solve it. Is that right?
So we leveraged our internal software that the city clerk is already using. So I wouldn't call it ISD software. It's a back-end permitting software that many, many departments use. And the city clerk was already heavily invested in that solution. Yes, we did sort of stand something up that could meet the needs of the ordinance. Using tools sets that we already had. There wasn't, and some research, there wasn't a software out there in the market that does this exact one thing that we were looking for. So it's really just a work in progress to figure out how we can make that experience both easier to use for the city clerk staff and for the external public.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure who on the team this one is for, but On the cybersecurity front, I saw in your answers to my questions, obviously there are city processes that we might be more hesitant to put online, also kind of perhaps internal databases that we might be less eager to have be accessible through online login to our employees. I'm just curious, are there particular areas that we as the council should not be holding our breath, expecting to have an online solution anytime soon because of those security concerns?
No, I mean, before I pass it off to Greg, I mean, I think my approach has always been around kind of security, that it needs to be secure by design and not security bolted on at the end. So, I mean, as long as these solutions have security at the table, you know, in an inception, in initial design, a lot of these solutions can, you know, be just as comfortable being deployed. It's just in a secure fashion. And given some of the frameworks, which I'm sure Greg will mention, and how much information that we allow exposed and how much we don't, and how we lock that down. This is part of it. I mentioned in my opening remarks, our MDM solution. Basically, an MDM solution is really understanding where your data is and how it's being classified, and securing the most sensitive data. So, I mean, in terms of our overall security approach, I will let Greg kind of speak to how we are approaching cybersecurity as just a component to overall IT security.
Sure. Just to answer the question specifically, so as far as online services and depending on, I think it depends on what type of data is being collected or transmitted through those online services. Obviously, if there is sensitive data like social security number, that type of data needs an extra layer of security compared to just general information. But we work with the technology teams to ensure that the security is built into the application as it's created, and we work hard to ensure that the best practices are followed. So I don't think there's any limitations, but some are more challenging than others to ensure that the correct level of security, along with the balance of usability, are there.
Great, thanks. Can I ask just quickly before because we're going to go next to the public testimony, if there's anything that the DoIT team would like to highlight about the PEG Access Fund? I know in your answers to our questions, I think to Councillor Flynn's questions in particular, you mentioned the fact that the revenue there has been declining, and we've also spent down the unencumbered revenue that was previously there. So and that there's some uncertainty about it kind of looking ahead in future fiscal years. So I thought maybe before we hear from the public and our partners really on that front, if someone could lay out a little bit of context.
Mike, do you want to talk a little bit about the PEG funding and some of the open topics around that?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, David. The PEG funding is funded from the cable franchising licenses, and the source of the revenue is cable TV video revenue, if you will. As everybody knows, cable TV revenue has been going down at a somewhat slow rate, but it is likely to be accelerated in the coming year due to some changes in rules promulgated by the Federal Communications Commission. We thought it was going to happen this year. We're fortunate that it did not. We believe that we have enough funding for everything to be fully funded for FY21. The city tracks it closely, the budget office tracks it closely, and we keep our two funded partners, Tech Goes Home and Boston Neighborhood Network Media Group, well informed, literally week to week, if there are any changes here. The city's also engaged, the city of Boston, that is also engaged with other cities in challenging these orders by the FCC because we think they are wrong. Unfortunately, a federal process in court can go on for an awfully long time, so we're not sure that that will be able to save the day. But I think this year we're absolutely fine. I think FY22, we may have things to look at.
Yeah.
Great, thanks so much for that. And I think since that's my first round time, I'm gonna jump now to our public testimony on the PEG Access Fund and Tech Goes Home. And then councilors, if folks can just raise their blue hand if they have second round questions, we will do second rounds, but just for those obviously who have them. So I think I'm first up going to recognize Theodora Hanna, and then it'll be Glenn Williams. And so if each of you can just, 1 second, we're getting you over here. If each of you, so Theo, or Theodora, sorry, if you want to go first and just identify yourself and give us your testimony.
Sure. Well, good afternoon, Chairwoman Bach and councilors. And first, thank you so much for the opportunity to testify and for all you're doing for residents of our city, particularly now. My name is Theodora Hanna. I'm co-CEO of Tech Goes Home, and that's Boston's nonprofit organization dedicated to addressing the digital divide for our residents of all ages. I'm testifying in favor of this order to fund the PEG Access Fund, which will support Tech Goes Home, an award-winning nonprofit that empowers communities to access and use digital tools to overcome barriers and advance lives. Tech Goes Home brings together the critical trio of life skills, quality internet, and a new device on which our community members can continue their education, apply for unemployment benefits, jobs, order essentials online, and access telehealth. With the city's steadfast and foundational support, in the past 5 years alone, we've served 22,000 learners and distributed 14,500 new computers. Participants have learned how to find jobs online, digitally communicate with their children's teachers, find affordable housing, sign up for SNAP, explore coding, navigate online city resources like Boss 311, communicate with elected officials, and so much more. Working with 200 community partners, we prioritize low-income and underserved populations aged 3 to 94, including people without technology at home, the unemployed and underemployed, people with limited English proficiency, individuals with disabilities, and people experiencing housing instability. Of the population we serve, 75% have household incomes under $35,000 a year. 85% are people of color. Nearly 50% are from immigrant families, and 30% of our adult learners are unemployed. The current pandemic has shone a glaring spotlight on the devastating effects of digital exclusion. We thank Councillors Campbell and Janey for their resolution to identify the extent of the divide among BPS families in order to help minimize the achievement gap. Without short and long-term attention to this social injustice that affects our neighbors of all ages, those on the wrong side of the digital divide will continue to disproportionately suffer. In response, we are redoubling our efforts while adapting our model to the stay-at-home reality. For instance, we've launched a distance learning program that mirrors our in-person courses, created a COVID-19 resource page on our website, and we have developed a live webinar series for TGH learners and for the general public. Our team is also creating video tutorials on topics such as ordering groceries, accessing health information, reaching out to doctors, filing for unemployment, and completing the census online. Last year, we experienced greater demand than ever for our programs and served a record-breaking 5,500 learners. Given the current pandemic and associated stay-at-home orders, the demand for our services has absolutely skyrocketed. Though we've worked tirelessly to build our philanthropic support to marry the city's essential commitment, we need significantly increased support from both public and private sectors if we are going to effectively end this inequity. With the support of the Council and approval of funding in the PEG Access Fund, we are eager to continue this partnership and better the lives of our Boston neighbors. To learn more about our work, please visit our website, techgoeshome.org, or reach out to me absolutely anytime at theo@techgoeshome.org. I want to thank you all for everything you do for the residents of our city. And finally, one more thing I just want to add, we have 2 quotes from our 2 Tech Goes Home instructors that just came in the past couple days. They're brief. One of our instructors said, a learner's daughter got COVID-19 and was having issues of housing and job discrimination because of it. The learner and I met after class one day, and I reviewed the different resources we had gone over and how they could help her out. She told me later on that it gave her confidence to fight, and now the DOJ is involved in helping her. And the second trainer told us, a learner in my course unexpectedly became responsible for teaching her students during this pandemic and had limited experience with online programs or resources. She was extremely stressed and unsure of herself. She called me to tell me that she received a shout out from her principal about how her Zoom meetings and the engagements of students had improved over the last couple of weeks. And that's it. And I'd be delighted to take any questions.
Great, thank you so much, Theo. I'm gonna have Glenn Williams go, and then we'll do second round questions from councilors, including any questions that councilors have in relation to Tech Goes Home and BNN and the PEG Access Fund. So I'm gonna recognize Glenn Williams, and then I'm passing the gavel virtually to Councillor Anissa Asabi-George, who's gonna just chair for a few minutes, and I'll be back in the chair shortly. But Councillor Asabi-George, you have the chair now, and I'll just recognize Glenn Williams from BNN.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Glenn.
Well, thank you. How are you today? Good afternoon, Madam Chair and fellow city councilors. My name is Glenn Williams. I'm the general manager for Boston Neighborhood Network, which is Boston's nonprofit charitable public access TV and radio provider. We also have our fully equipped digital media center. I am proud to be with you today on behalf of BNN to support this order to fund public, educational, and government access services that are known as PEG, that BNN provides to the Boston's cable viewers, radio listeners, and residents. First of all, I'd like to note that the impact of community media in Boston is stronger than it's ever been. Last February at the Mayor's Open House over at Joshua Quincy School, I was really pleasantly surprised to get the number of participants who recognized our work and pointed out particular shows they enjoyed. I'm affiliated with several organizations across the Boston area, and because of our outreach and visibility, I'm proud to say that more residents are recognizing us for our presence, professionalism, and excellence. We regularly hear testimony from young people who work over here at BNN from across the educational field about the value of our hands-on training programs, summer youth programs, internship programs, and about how these programs prepare them for a career in the media. I'm pleased to report to the council that during the last fiscal year to date, BNN staff and crew produced over 900 shows, including Neighborhood Network News, which is our nightly news show that goes on every day. We escalated our capacity to cover live events. For instance, on September 21st, the exclusive live coverage of the Reverend Dr. Michael E. Hines' funeral and celebration. When I say exclusive, that means if any of the major networks wanted any feed from that funeral, they had to come through Boston Neighborhood Network to get it. On July 14th, we covered the Unity Cup soccer tournament over in South Boston. It was great. Over 23 represented countries playing in the tournament here in Boston. We covered it live. On October 28th, some of you may recognize this, City Councilor at Large candidate debate over at English High. Covered that live for the first time with call-ins. We also had Election Day coverage on the radio with a roundtable discussion, not to mention all of the high school football, basketball, hockey games that we carry live to the constituents at home. BNN members produced 2,657 new television programs in Boston. This number is down slightly because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Something I'm extremely proud of is our partnership with the Boston Public Schools during this time has produced unprecedented participation and value to continuing the education of our students impacted. Just to share the video on demand numbers we have received to date, 3,863 replays via video on demand alone since mid-March. That means the programming that we've been getting from the Boston Public Schools that we're airing, we've dedicated specific times during the day, Monday through Friday. 9 o'clock in the morning till noon, and then 2 o'clock in the afternoon until 4, which is dedicated to Boston Public Schools programming that's being produced and sent to us by the teachers in those areas. We also air 6 times a week live call-in programs for elementary, middle school, and high school math. This became very valuable to the high school seniors preparing for the AP tests. We have teachers zooming in different things, and we're having people answering questions on the other end of the line live for these kids at home doing their homework. We are in the production phase of airing graduation ceremonies that will allow families to witness their children's accomplishments. This means aunts and uncles from across the country will have the pleasure of being part of their loved ones' graduations. That's individual graduation ceremonies. We've also extended the live, the VOD stuff to all of the membership here at BNN. So all of their shows can be seen under our video on demand format if someone had missed this show. Over 800 Boston nonprofits, schools, churches, city agencies, and community groups use BNN's resources, TV and radio studios, media lab, equipment, and production facilities to connect with Boston residents. Numerous Boston nonprofits like Parkway Hearing, Boston Main Streets, Disability Law Center, and the city's Disability Commission use our facility to enrich their communities with their mission and information. Over 21 Boston residents have taken the radio production class and have created over 300 hours of local interest programming. One of the benefits of having this radio station attached to our organization is the opportunity to provide residents with disabilities an avenue to share their voice. Besides, TV isn't for everybody, so. We have created 22 public service announcements to keep Bostonians informed and aware. Granted, because of the current pandemic that we are experiencing, several have come from the CDC, Boston Water and Sewer, and the city itself. We have also created them with the Boston Public Schools, Big Brothers and Big Sisters of Massachusetts, the Army Corps of Engineering for the job that they're doing cleaning up the canal down the Cape, and of course the coronavirus. I know that some of you have been on a variety of programs at BNN, and some of you have been interviewed by me. I mean, I hope that you all recognize the enormous contribution BNN has made to the community of Boston. I have been associated with Boston Neighborhood Network for 24 years as a television and radio host and producer, member and president of the board of directors, WBCA radio manager, and now the general manager. I've seen this organization grow into the award-winning Access Media Center it is today. In lieu of listing all of those awards, I will let you know of one I'm very proud of. Our Around Town has been nominated for a New England Regional Emmy Award for their documentary work on displaced immigrant children. It's called The Last Dream. Look it up, there'll be tears. It's a fascinating program. With our many memberships, BNN will also be able to continue to provide engineering and technical support to Boston's PEG stations, including Boston City Council TV, which we're on right now, City TV, and Boston Kids and Family TV, and of course WBCA. I believe they're all essential to the community. On behalf of BNN, I want to thank the City Council, Mayor Martin Walsh, Chief Information Officer David Ilgus, I hope I got that right, Mike Lynch, and everyone at DoIT, and of course Justin Petty, President of the Board of Directors, for your commitment to sustaining BNN Media, a place for Boston residents to create local programming for the good of their neighbors. Without the support of the City of Boston, through its cable and radio licenses, we would not be able to serve so many Boston residents and nonprofits over these many years. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Glenn, and thank you for your service to our city, as well as everything that BNN does, everything that Tech Goes Home does for our families in particular, and especially our students in the Boston Public Schools. I'm very grateful for all that you've done, and happy to have been a guest book reader for the Nighttime Stories series. That was a lot of fun, really stretched my limits. As a former high school teacher, reading a bedtime story, that was a lot of fun. So thank you for that. I do want to see if my colleagues have any second round or next round of questions. I'm going to start with Councillor Braden. Do you have any additional questions? And then it will be Councillor Campbell. Maybe we've lost Councillor Braden. Councillor Campbell, do you have additional questions for the group before us this morning or this afternoon? Councillor Janey, Council President Janey, any questions for this round?
Hi, how are you? Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine, President Janey. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. I wanted to follow up. I know it was touched upon earlier, but I wanted to follow up on the digital divide. So as I mentioned in my first round of questions, I'm really interested in hearing how we are investing in this budget in a way that will help close the digital divide. I heard about the $10 program. I wonder, so what the parameters are around that? Is that for public housing? Is that for low income? And then I want to know what opportunities for free access. Where are we in terms of expanding that wicked free Wi-Fi? Is it finally in all of our parks? Is it in all of our public, municipal buildings? And if not, what percentage? How close are we getting there? And then in terms of, I share the concerns about how this plays out in the workforce, how it plays out in our schools. I'm certainly aware of my privilege, of all of our privilege on this call, that we can continue to do our work in such a way through technology, and that many others can't. Even if they work in a profession that could allow for this kind of remote working, if they don't necessarily have either the access or the same kind of comfort level or the same kind of knowledge of how to use these tools, then they're not really useful. So those are my questions. How are we moving forward in closing this digital divide?
So on the digital divide, the way, and I did touch on it in a few of the different responses that I had this afternoon. There was a couple different ways to kind of look at the tools that we have in front of us, and in the way that the city of Boston is looking at the best approach that we should be taking. When we talk about BONET, when we talk about Boston's fiber optic network, that's really kind of our connecting our BPS. It's connecting our city buildings. It's more of a back end dark fiber environment to connect really city service or our city buildings together. Wicked free Wi-Fi is, and we are expanding that, and I will have Mike kind of touch on that when I have him step in to respond to some of this in more detail. Is more meant for more open spaces. But when you think about the digital divide, when you think about digital equity, that really lands in the homes of these people or apartments of these people, looking at connecting not only students looking to get online to take classes, looking for individuals to interface with 311 and other city services. So the way we've always kind of approached it is really around competition, bringing some of our vendors and our ISP, our internet service providers, to the table to drive down costs. And I think you touched on the $10 cost or the $10 charge for internet essentials. And that is going to bring broadband connectivity into the home, which is where people really need it. to really address the digital equity concerns. But we are expanding our our wicket-free Wi-Fi for more open spaces for people to, check something online or to send an email. That is a little bit different than the digital equity space, but I will let Mike to kind of chime in and fill out some of that answer a little bit.
Thanks, David. Yes, Councillor. As David said, the city's network is a network mostly for administrative use, camera use, wicket-free Wi-Fi, all this stuff, and we are expanding that out now to all of the city neighborhoods. The bulk of it will be done by the end of this calendar year. I think there might be another 80 sites coming in the following year. As that builds out succeeds, wicket-free Wi-Fi will be hung off open spaces, public spaces, extending out from the campus, if you will, of city buildings in all the neighborhoods. The goal here is to provide a public convenience. We really cannot compete in the home with Comcast or Verizon because we're actually using their fiber to extend our network, so we can't quite be in a position where we compete with them. However, at the same time, we work on a number of digital equity initiatives. Certainly, as you heard earlier, during the COVID crisis, we were acquiring very quickly tablets and hotspots and literally throwing them out the door to social service agencies who were reaching out saying, I need help for Boston residents who are our clients. And we met that need with about 1,500 to 2,000 units. Now going forward, we're working with Tech Goes Home, who we are funding here, to provide training and familiarity with online to populations who have little experience, particularly the elderly. That is the goal in our funding here today. 5 years ago, the mayor doubled the funding that we give to Tech Goes Home. For the last 4 years, the council has supported that funding. In addition, Tech Goes Home themselves have been knocking on doors all over town and raising money on their own. I think this coming year, they are actually matching the city's contribution, so their funding has doubled. The funding for what they do is here. I sometimes describe the work of Tech Goes Home as a broker. They partner with everybody. If you can't give them money, maybe you can teach a class. If you can't teach a class, maybe you can host a class. And they're all over town doing this with hundreds of partners, and it is working very well. I think in the last year, Theo could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the last year, they trained up 6,000 people in over 500 classes. So it's a very successful platform, and it works very well to meet the unmet need for digital equity in the city of Boston.
Thank you, Mike, for that. And thank you, Council President Janey. Next, we have Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the team. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. Councillor Flaherty, are you with us?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Just allowing my colleague to finish up. Good afternoon, everybody. I just want to obviously comment for the great work and how important public access information is. Obviously, as we know, and I get this as a citywide councilor, information is key. Public access and digital equity they're all equal partners, and we get out across the city. And when you talk to people, particularly during, before COVID, obviously you saw people that appreciated being able to watch things and to get information, particularly all of our cultural events, parades, etc. But particularly during COVID, being able to tune in and to have access to trusted sources, I think was critical as well. So for the job that everyone does, Glenn, we obviously see you out. I see you all across the city because we do all the parades, which unfortunately have all been suspended because of COVID. But again, information is key. And Mike Lynch, we go back a long time from the early days, probably back to Cablevision, if you will. And you were there when, and I was there when we wired City Hall, and particularly the council chamber for its first time. In fact, the school department at that time, the school department was kicking and screaming. They didn't want to go on TV. So as council president, I offered for them to use our chamber because decisions were being made over there, and not a lot of folks were aware of what was happening because they didn't have the information and they weren't on TV. And as a result of my offering them to come to the chamber, they ended up getting plugged in themselves. So, but it was your efforts and your team's efforts. So we're obviously happy to have, I think, arguably probably one of the best municipal public access programmings. I know Glenn described in detail all the work that is brought to bear, as well as the access that people get. So keep up the great work. Happy to support this portion of the budget, and look forward to working with you, all of you, as we move forward in making sure that, again, digital equity is there, public access continues to be there, and any technological upgrades that we can get, and making sure that all of our communities have access to Wi-Fi is critical. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty. Next we have Councillor Mejia. Councillor Mejia.
I actually have no further questions. Just wanted to thank you again for all your hard work. And the only thing that I would echo is that digital divide and equity issue is real. There are some folks that don't even know that the internet exists still out here. So just really do appreciate, as we start transitioning and thinking about putting all of our documents online, if that's the direction that we move forward in, that we do so, thinking about those folks who don't know how to navigate the internet, and that we still have a way to support those who like the old-fashioned way of just going up to the counter and asking for a birth certificate. So making sure that we are creating space and opportunities for all different types of folks who are trying to access the information that we have. And that's it. Thank you so much for all your hard work, and I'm looking forward to continuing this partnership and learning more about what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia. And then we're back up to the top with Councillor Braden. Councillor Braden.
Thank you. I'm really happy to hear about the Tech Goes Home outreach to elders. I think in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis, we realize just how vulnerable our elders are, and how not tech savvy a whole lot of them are. And just being able to access technology and to keep connected to people, especially if they are have limited mobility and whatever, even without the COVID crisis, it's really an important piece. And I'm glad that we're working with Tech Goes Home to make that happen. The other issue that's happened, I think COVID-19 has brought to light lots of opportunities for increased participation in public forums. And one thing I noticed recently was the Austin Civic Association had a Zoom call for their monthly meeting. It was the first meeting they'd had in a few months, and the attendance at the meeting was 70 people. I think as far as public meetings, we should be looking at maybe a hybrid model to increase access at meetings, so that folks can join us remotely on Zoom calls, and just expand the reach of our meetings, so that we can hear the voices of more people. I think it's not, I know you folks are innovators and constantly thinking about how we might improve things, so I appreciate that. But I think we have an exciting opportunity right now to make things happen in a different way, just because we've been forced to do things differently, and it's opened up lots of new ideas about things that we could be trying. So thank you so much for all your work. The information technology is a really critical part of what we do and how we reach our constituents and our population in Boston. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Braden.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. I see that Chair Bach has returned, so I will wrap up my comments with a thank you. Appreciate all of your work. And like I said earlier, if you are not up and running, none of us are up and running, especially during this time. So thank you for that continued work, and thank you for allowing us to remain productive during this time. Madam Chair, I'm returning the gavel to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Councillor Sabi-George. Yeah, and I've been following the hearing. I had to step away for a moment from chairing. So I want to thank the folks who spoke on behalf of the PG Access Fund, and I really want to thank all of you at DoIT, and also for providing such thorough written answers to our questions. I had a bunch of questions there that you guys answered. And so I just want to quickly check, Sarah, who's in attendance, if you'd raise your blue hand if you are here to testify. I don't have a last name for you. If you're here to testify, just raise your hand. And then otherwise, I'm mindful of the fact we've got another hearing starting at 2 o'clock. So, and it's been a long day. So thank you so much to the DoIT crowd and to ISD from earlier this morning. David, any final words?
No, thank you very much for your continued support. Thank you for the time this morning. And I hope that you see the important work that the technology department does, even in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis, and where we have kind of been all thrust into the role of technology and keeping us all connected, and looking to see what is around the corner as we start to open up the city.
Yeah, and sorry, and I just saw my colleague, Councillor Campbell, did also have some final comments. So Councillor Campbell, I want to give you the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. And I didn't have any questions, but I did want, and this is Aiden, he says hello. I did want to thank David, you and your team, just echoing my colleagues for the incredible work you're doing, particularly as we obviously have gone remote and virtual on everything we're doing. So thank you and your team for the hard work. You know how critically important it is. And Glenn, thank you for your work. The fund, BNN, I mean, we can't stress enough how important it is that folks have access to the programming. And I know you mentioned Reverend Hines' service, which was a really powerful service, and that exclusivity is also critically important too for a community and for organizations like yours. And Theo, of course, thank you and Dan and your incredible team for the work you guys do. The digital divide obviously existed before COVID-19. It has only been exacerbated by this pandemic. And so we are, my team and I are absolutely looking forward to continuing to work in partnership with your org and so many others. Aiden is also looking to work in partnership with all of you on these critical issues. So thank you so much, and stay safe and healthy, and talk to you soon. Thank you, Councillor Bach.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you very much, Councillor Campbell.
Thank you so much,
Thanks so much.
We couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Campbell. And I'll just put a bug in the DoIT folks' ear, because I forgot to ask about it, but I'll just get to you on and offline. But I know that Council President Janey and Councillor Arroyo and others on the council are interested in technological solutions for us being able to look at the census redistricting issue next year, and how to do that most effectively. And so I think we may be knocking down your door on that sometime soon.
Okay, that's good.
Great. All right. Well, without further ado, this hearing of the Ways and Means Committee is adjourned. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor.